Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome 5 remarkable directors, incredibly talented people, the nominees for Best Director for a feature film. Quite a grouping. Go all take your seats. While we get them wired up here, I want to thank them actually all for being here. Sean is not. He actually contacted me last night. He is in pre-production on a film with Gus Van Sant, who in fact was once up here as well, some of you may remember. As we get ourselves wired, I was thinking, I read this last night, that Alfred Hitchcock once said that a film is good when the price of a dinner, the theater admission, and the babysitter are worth it. There's no question that in the case of the films made by these masterful directors, it certainly has been very well worth it. And I thank them all for being here. Let me introduce them to you. To my right is Paul Thomas Anderson, who made There Will Be Blood. And next to Paul is Julian Schnabel, who made The Diving Bell and The Butterfly. And next to Julian are Ethan and Joel Coen, No Country for Old Men. And Tony Gilroy, Michael Clayton. Let's see if I can get myself wired.
Some water?
Okay. All right. I also read that Fellini said something about what makes a good film. If you have a good opening and a good ending, you've got a good film. So let's start talking about your openings and endings. Paul, you made a silent movie. The first 15 minutes of your movie, I don't believe, have any dialogue in them except some painful sounds. Talk about how you decided to evolve as a director this beginning of this film.
Well, that would be a decision as a writer.
Okay.
And it just didn't seem like there was anything for them to say. I guess I imagined what it would be like to prospect for silver or oil, which was very lonely, quiet work that you do by yourself, that, that the labor was so hard. At no point would you say, golly, look at all this oil we've got here, or something like that. I just couldn't think of anything for them to say.
And in actually staging it, you have Daniel Day-Lewis doing this physical work, and we start in this hole in the ground. Did you construct a hole in the ground? What was the actual physical set that you built to actually begin this
We went
story?
to the bottom of a 50-foot mine shaft that had a horizontal entrance and a vertical entrance. So we were able to get our camera gear in one way and be down in there. And it was terrific because there was no directing. There was no directorial choices to make. You had an opening of about 3 feet to put the camera in. That was kind of it. You knew just where the camera was going to go. It was dictated by this abandoned mine shaft, which is down in Shafter, which is the sort of Texas-Mexico border. It's about 45 minutes where we shot the main portion of the film.
And the physical labor that he had to go through, what kind of training, if in rehearsal at all, did he have to actually know what you did as you chopped away?
I have no idea what he was doing. He was in Ireland preparing for the film, and I know he was chopping wood in his backyard for months and months and months, which is really all he could do to practice for it, I suppose. Just so he looked like he knew what he was doing.
And when he gets up at the top, he sits alone. There's actually lightning behind him at one time. I'm curious whether that was something that was post-production in terms of adding to him when he's sitting alone.
No, we just got very lucky with a terrific, in Texas, as I'm sure the brothers can attest, that the weather is wonderful and horrible at the same time, and just got wonderfully lucky with a rainstorm that came in.
And when he falls, because in that opening he's also building, and he comes, how was that fall figured out? What did you do? Did he take the fall himself initially? How was it?
He was on a harness so that he could fall, but we did a few takes, and and I said something that you should probably never say to Daniel Day-Lewis, which was, it looks fake. and so then he fell down the 50-foot mine shaft, and he hit his back and broke some ribs, and it looks pretty good.
The sacrifices we make for films, because Ann said, you'll do anything, we're desperate people. I didn't realize you were going to prove this. Did you go on shooting the next day?
Of course, no, that minute we kept shooting, you know, there was nothing else to do. He looked at me and he said, keep going? I said, yeah, keep going. He just had to then moan and wail at the bottom of the you know, and act like he was hurt, so it was kind of worked out really well.
The sequence develops where he's also in this opening where we introduce the child. And I'm curious, how did you work with the child? How did you cast it? And how did he with those initial scenes when we really have a little baby in this?
Yeah, it's a horrible situation to have a baby out there that in that kind of environment. They were twins, as you know, as you normally do. But I think the parents were more concerned because their babies were crying, as they should have been crying, and they were thinking, they were feeling like the babies weren't giving a good performance, you know, and we were saying it's whatever the baby does is fine. We really were okay. There was no performance we needed from the child. So, and of course they were crying. It was hot and dusty and windy, and we were poking them, and it was horrible.
And the guy put oil on their head, too.
Yeah, and putting oil on their faces, and yeah. I mean, I have a baby myself. I thought, wow, I should just bring my own baby in here and do this.
But you don't have twins.
No, I don't. No.
Did you know right from the start, or it was part of this in the editing, in the opening, that you were going to take this much time before you would actually even hear his voice?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it presented itself as a good idea. Hopefully, not feeling like a novelty or anything like that, but just it literally would have nothing to say to each other, and that the first time we'd hear him speak, he'd say, "Ladies and gentlemen." Seemed like a good idea.
Right, I'm an oil man.
Yeah.
It's a great opening, daring. Talking about daring openings, Julian, your opening, for those who had not seen this, is quite spectacular from its obviously initial subjective point of view. Can you talk about, and in particularly within those first shots, there are so many different kinds of shots, from ones that look like they're effects, meaning that it feels like the red is somehow created, to stretched or striated images as we start to see inside that hospital room. The variety of imagery is intense within the very first 2 and 3 minutes. Can you talk about how those images evolved?
Well, I wanted to see what Jean-Dominique Bauby was seeing, not what we would see if we were watching him in the hospital. So I used a swing and tilt lens that could make one part of the image clearer and another part fuzzier, and you could make it more fuzzy if you wanted, and did things basically in the camera. We had a crank camera where we would rewind on top of our own film, so you'd get superimposition sometimes, but essentially the blink is this. It's 2 fingers going like that. That's
in front of the lens, literally.
Yeah, that was the most natural blink. Other blinks, you know, people always talk about a blink being the shutter, the cut. Well, that looks very mechanical. So I always think, every time I talk about the blinks, I think about Chris Walken talking to Dennis Hopper. Says, you know, there's 50 pantomimes, you know, like there's 17 for men, but 50 for a woman. You know, you're like trying to tell me nothing, but you're telling me everything. Anyway, I'm just, so I figured out all these different ways to blink.
Did you use your fingers? I mean,
yes.
In front of the lens itself?
Yes. And if you shoot more light on it, you'll see the red, the way you will see red on the bottom of your eyelids. And once your eye gets sewn up, everybody can do that. You close your eye, you'll see part of your nose. So I actually had a nose that I put on the lens also at one time. Then I cut the nose off of it and had a whole face that was on the side. I mean, I had to decide who was going to hold the camera. If it was going to be me, or if it was going to be Matthew Almeric, or if it was going to be the cameraman. But obviously, the idea that he would be very, very close to the people that were talking to him was essential to me. And sound was a very important thing in that also. And his friend, Bernard Chapuis, used to sing drinking songs when they'd go to Nîmes. His girlfriend once told me, because his girlfriend said that they had seen me at a bullfight. I didn't know them, but I guess that told me enough. One, that I could include bullfighting stuff in the movie, and two, that I needed to see Bernard Chapuis. So he came over to this friend of ours' house, and he was singing one afternoon. And he had this incredible sonorous voice, and he was singing these bullfighting songs. I said, just, can you show up at the set one day? So he came over to this publishing house, and instead of a table, he was banging on a door, but I recorded him singing, so you hear Bernard's voice in his head as he's swimming up from the mist of a coma.
You also have two quick cuts of, I think, both Inez and certainly his son from the accident.
Yes.
Did those clearly were shot at another time. Did they come in and, as part of the editorial process in this initial, 2-3 minutes? I'm curious where, because there's so much.
I basically knew what I was going to put in there in the script, and even if things that were not scripted, I knew where they were going.
Got it.
And so the fact is that the truth of the matter is Inez, whose real name is Florence, was really the one who took care of her boyfriend. And the mother, the wife of the mother of his children, showed up at the hospital only a few times. But Jean-Dominique Bauby left the book to the wife of the mother of his children and his kids. So it was like an annuity for them. So he kind of left her out, but I didn't feel the same way about that. And I talked to her, and so I wanted to show that he was living with another woman when he went to pick up his kid. And that when he said I could be with the woman I love, I wanted to show that he was really in love with her. And I'm sorry.
In that opening sequence, particularly, when did you decide when you were going to actually show him? Because much like Paul, there's a long sequence before we actually see, and I think the first thing we actually see is the close-up of eyes, not his face. And I'm curious, what was the moment that you said, okay, now I'm ready to show him?
Well, there was a wide shot of him in the bed right before he has his epiphany when he says, had I been blind and deaf, or did it take the harsh light of disaster for me to find my true nature? That's when you see the glaciers falling into the Alaskan Sea. I thought, this is a good time to see him. I mean, he can't stay in that diving bell anymore, and I thought, okay, now it's time to turn into a butterfly, so we get to, and that's...
Were the glaciers, by the way, part of your script, or was that something that was evolving for you? Because they are pretty amazing.
I had written a script to the book Perfume. Mm-hmm. I don't know who knows about this or not in this room, but I mean, I had a really impossible lack of dialogue with a man named Bernd Eichinger, who I don't recommend to anybody. A subhuman. Anyway, and I wrote a great script that never was used, but there were things I thought that Jean-Baptiste Grenouille could go up on top of the mountain and smell all the way to Egypt, or see ecosystems falling apart. So I thought Jean-Dominique Bauby could do it too with his imagination and his memory. And really, all this stuff happened at the same time. 7 years had gone by. I wasn't going to do this. My father was dying. The script came. Darren, who gave me the book in the first place, was in the room with my dad. And I thought, well... And it was in the first person. Both of these things were in the first person. So I like the idea that we know what's going on. People in the movie don't. It's like when you see William Holden lying in the pool. He says, "There I am, dead in the pool." And you go.
So the ice was an image from the other script that you then decided to use.
The ice was an image that I always wanted to put in there, and the music with it I'd been listening to for 20 years. So I just I'm kind of like somebody that brings a bunch of junk onto their porch and leaves it there, and okay, I need that now.
I know that Joel and Ethan. I know that you're obviously adopted a book. The first images are of Texas again, with a voiceover of a character who, in fact, we don't meet for a while. And I'm curious how you both decided that this was going to be the approach to get us into the story, and particularly even those images, how those images were gotten. Did you guys go out and shoot them? Are they second unit? Where did they come from? I'm so glad that happened.
beautiful.
Aren't we all really want to know how it works? And they both started to speak at the same time. I really feel very relieved. Go on. Please, guys, tell us.
It was well timed. We weren't there, actually. Roger Deakins, it was a second unit thing that was shot before we started shooting the movie. Although we went to a bunch of places with Roger, but he went back with his assistant and shot a lot of dawn and dusk stuff before we started principal photography.
We found the spots that we wanted to shoot for those images, and then Roger went out, but we didn't want to wake up that early in the morning.
No. The shot that in fact introduces your first character, the character that was in Julian's movie, the actor that is Javier, is part of that sequence, and I'm curious how that was emerging. Did you both say, okay, let's come from this landscape to find our character?
Yeah, I don't know what exactly the thought process was. I'm trying to reconstruct sort of how we got there, but I know that the sense of place was so fundamental to the story, to the novel, to Cormac McCarthy's novel, that it was logical to sort of establish that in a simple way at the beginning of the story. And the other part of it was this sort of idea that the character that Javier plays is almost, at the beginning of it, feel a little bit like the man who fell to earth, that he comes out of the landscape. Mm-hmm. You don't know where he comes from, what he's doing out there in the middle of the highway, being arrested by, how, why there, that was sort of what we were after, that he just comes out of the landscape.
And we also wanted to withhold him to a certain extent. When we see him at first, we don't see much of him. We pretty much just see his hair, which we knew even then was what it was all about.
It all is about hair. I do know that's all about hair. The fact of Tommy Lee Jones's voice that was playing, was that, because I do believe in the novel, there is some first-person parts. So how did that evolve too?
Right, there's a lot of, almost half the novel is just interior monologue of this character, Tommy Lee Jones' character, and it was kind of as Paul said, I mean, it's kind of just a kind of threshold writing question. We thought, we're adopting the novel, what do we do with that? The obvious thing to do would have been to render it all as voiceover, which we didn't really want to do, except in that some of it we incorporated into dramatic scenes, and in the one instance to introduce the movie, we decided to make that voiceover.
And did you feel a challenge that we're not going to show this character for a while? Or
yeah, well, we didn't want to see his face until the scene where he's strangling the...
Well, you're talking about...
No, actually, in fact, I'm interested in that scene, but I mean Tommy Lee Jones.
Tommy.
That character we don't meet for, in fact, a little while here. So I'm curious, where did you feel that this was going to both, intrigue, and where were, in terms of storytelling, were you concerned, we're not meeting this character, but we're hearing it?
No.
It's funny. It does seem, when you put it that way, it seems perverse to have voiceover by a character that you're not going to meet for a while. We just didn't worry about it, frankly.
And we'd done, actually, we did a movie, Fargo.
Right, there's the third man, there's the weird narrator at the beginning of the movie.
We'd done a movie before where really the principal character didn't come in until 30 minutes, 40 minutes, into the movie. And
talk about the fight for a second, because it's a long fight, and one of the powerful images in that fight is what's on the floor, the scraping, and I'm curious how that emerged.
By accident. They were making a lot of scuff marks on the floor, and we looked at them, we went, wow, that's great. The only problem was, a continuity problem, obviously, because the scuff marks were there from the beginning, and we kept shooting, other angles that were supposed to be the beginning of the fight. So we attempted to clean them up for about 5 minutes and then said, oh, fuck it, we'll do it in the computer.
So you did clean some of it up in the
We
computer.
tried.
Now, at the end of the fight, the expression on Javier's face is a very powerful moment, and I think it reveals a lot about character in this particular moment. I'm curious what you said to him, if anything, and how that evolved.
Do you remember?
No.
Neither of you.
I think he said, just look exactly like Ethan. Didn't he say that?
Oh, you're,
When
you
he's
know.
angry?
In evolving his character, what had you guys talked about in terms of who this character was?
Well, you know, with Javier,
Javier's big on that, isn't he?
We had a lot of long conversations where I, in retrospectively feel that absolutely nothing got said.
They were bizarre. Javier loved to talk about it, and most of the time I think Joel and I didn't know what he was talking about, but the conversations seemed
We're
to
always
satisfy
interesting.
him.
Yeah.
Did the conversations end?
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, and sometimes they ended well, and sometimes not so well. He would go off, and Javier would be upset at sort of the direction that we seemed to be sort of pushing him in, and sometimes he wasn't upset at all. But no, it wasn't a contentious thing at all. It was just
and it was all mysterious to us. He would be upset because of what he thought we were saying, but we didn't know
what we were saying.
Or he would be happy and.
Let me pursue this one more moment, though. What kind of things were you saying in terms of I'm not interested for the ones. I'm just in terms of your communication with him as an actor trying to portray a very bizarre human being, or subhuman, if we'll go with Julian's words.
Well, you know, I mean, like I think with a lot of those kinds of conversations that you have with actors, they run the gamut, and sometimes he wants to talk about the character from a sort of theoretical point of view, and sometimes it's just about physical direction, and you're talking, and often I think actors, especially Javier, who has a very, really interesting process, it completely, as Ethan was saying, sort of indecipherable to us, but obviously has to do with his intellect, but also his instincts in terms of his physicality and those things that you might say about what you want them to do physically may resonate much more strongly and immediately in terms of a direction for the actor than any kind of, sort of analysis of the character in the context of the text or whatever it happens to be. So sometimes it was about, I think we all knew essentially what we wanted to avoid with the character.
Which was?
Well, that it ran the risk of, being a cliche, the sort of unstoppable killer, the Terminator, but how to do that, I think, was really, largely up to Javier and a discussion with him that often got into just specific things about physicality,
We'll pursue this a little bit, but Tony, talk about the opening as well. Here, there is a voice of a character that, in fact, we don't meet for actually a fairly long time.
Yeah.
And also a very sort of fascinating, intense visual sequence of this late night into these offices and a deal that's being made with hundreds of lawyers at the time. And I'm curious whether those opening images were something that you had preconceived, or as you were there, they developed as you were actually on the set and seeing what this space looks like and who these people were.
Well, I'd written the monologue. It was in the script, and we shot it. The first conversation I had with Tom said, "Well, this is all voiceover. You don't need me to." No, I said, "We're going to shoot it." So that was George's first day, actually, in the Queen's House of Detention, and he sat down, and Tom did. And we shot it because we didn't know. We really didn't know what we'd end up using in the end. I wanted to have it. I wanted to take it in the cutting room. We didn't really know whether this opening how it would develop. So we shot it. We had it on film. We finished, and we hadn't shot the opening. Any of that stuff was all done in post. And I had to let Robert Elswit go to Paul. So Robert cut out on me, and we were in the cutting room, and. It was a real science project. For about 6 weeks, it was sort of I never no film school or anything. So for me, it was sort of like a mini film school education. It was fascinating what you could and could not put against the voiceover in the beginning of the movie. Because it was a disembodied voice, it turned out you couldn't show a single face. If anytime we put a face up, your mind would immediately try to make sense of what was going on and say, is that the person who's speaking? So we tried a bunch of stuff in a sort of stick figure, shitty kind of way, and that was really, that was such a disaster. So then we were in the Brill building, and my brother cut the film, and he's in his room, and I had all my little digital cameras, and I started going back to a lot of the law firms that we scouted and other places that we had relationships with, and just going back at night with a little bunch of little digital cameras, and making a lot of little movies with the machinery. All these law firms have all these great, transfer systems for documents, and it's like they made, strapping cameras to carts and sending them down things and doing all this stuff and all the little macro shots of wheels, and we gradually, over like 6 weeks, we kept putting it back and putting it back and putting it back, and we sketched together this little homemade DV version of all these images, and so it was all sketched out, and then we went back and grabbed all the hero versions of it. Went back over a couple nights to do it, but I learned, I mean, the stuff that I learned doing that, just sort of woodshedding there for 6 weeks, was pretty. It was probably the stuff that all these guys know already, but I mean, it was fascinating what you could and couldn't do.
The shot that follows the delivery and ends up finding Sidney Pollack. That was initially still your opening, though. That was
the script had the script. Yeah, and originally, I think the very first version years ago, it had a sweeping helicopter that came through 6th Avenue, and this oceanic version of and that gradually got stripped away, not just by economics, but by good taste over time. The real, I think that sort of everybody. You start very practically. It's like Paul said, you're in a hole and you can't move the camera, and a lot of things that start really practically, where the limitations, they end up, if you're in the right hunt, they end up having like some larger effect that you were, instinctively, hopefully going for. And as we got to the end of doing the opening, and there was a lot of resistance. A lot of people were wondering, and later on there was resistance against, it's too confusing. But I began to realize as we did the opening that the real sort of meta byproduct of it was that it was okay. The other thing, to give people permission to sort of pay attention but not pay attention. So much information is coming from him. I want you to take it in if you want to, but there's also a permission you have to give the audience to say, you don't have to hang on every word. You don't have to know everything that's going on here. Just feel this. And I also want to say, you got to lean forward. I'm not gonna fuck around. I'm not gonna stop here. I'm not gonna explain anything. You got to hang with me here. But that journey, when it arrives, I began to realize that it's sort of like a little mini version of the movie in a way, which is that if you stay with me and you don't fall off the cart, I'll get you someplace at the end of it. And it's sort of like. And it kind of began to work that way, and that, at least that was my argument when people wanted to cut it out later on.
Now, the introduction of your hero, of Michael Clayton Clooney, comes right after this sequence, correct? Where you've got this bag where you see his little card, and you
in the Chinese card room, yeah.
Now you introduce your hero.
Yeah.
Talk about the end. We just saw the end here, which is a major confrontation. But I'm actually curious about leaving the very last shot, which is
George in the cab.
Yes, in the cab. And how did that evolve?
We were a very, very precise and tidy shoot. I mean, it doesn't sound that way, leaving the sort of opening to the end, but everything else that we did was really, and I was, pretty buttoned up, and a lot of people watching me to make sure I knew what I was doing, and so it built up a lot of goodwill. And we were at the Hilton, and we were in Midtown, and we didn't have the final shot. I couldn't find anything that seemed worthy, and we shot a couple shots, really. The boring 6th Avenue shot of him in the crowd walking, and everything was just really tedious. And I went home one night in the middle of shooting, and I don't know, I really wasn't watching any movies. I didn't have any time or anything, but for some reason the movie The Piano Teacher was there. And for some reason, I put it in and I got sucked into it. And the ending of that, when Isabelle Huppert stabs herself and she walks out, and it's just, I thought, God, it has to be something that raw, or it has to have some kind of, it has to be there. And I live in cabs. I don't know, at some point I sort of said, let's just try this. Everyone was sort of really looking at me for about a week going, we're coming to the end. You've had everything else. What are we going to do now? And, so we thought, let's put a camera on George in the back of the cab and see what happens. And we did it once, and it was one of those things where you try, there's a couple of things, you do it and it almost works, and you go, oh God, we're going to go back and really get this. So we really went at it. We had no permission. We had a great relationship with the cops by that point, and that's the big benefit of having George. I mean, we got air traffic moved around, and it's like, if George would come out of the trailer and take his picture, we can like change the traffic pattern at LaGuardia and get the shot. Seriously. So, short of having somebody killed on 6th Avenue, we could kind of do what we wanted as long as we could clear the paparazzi. So we went back the second time, and I don't know how many we shot. I bet we did about 6 or 7 of them.
What did you say to him?
You know what? He's in the cab alone. The camera's fixed. There's a driver. We're in the police car in front. There's one lead car, a patrol car, that's trying to clear traffic because we didn't want to stop. So we're coming up 6th Avenue, we want to come 57th, and we want to come back down, and we've worked this whole route out. We can't control any of it. So George is in the back alone. We've got the monitor, and it's staticky. It's going in and out because you're moving. And we did it about 3 or 4 times, and various things would fuck up. Someone would see George and wave, or we'd get stuck or something. But they were all, he was killing every one of them. He was fantastic. So we're resetting, and we're in front of the hill, and I'm just jamming around. So I lean in the back of the cab, and I said, this is great. This is my directing style, is what are you doing? So, forensic directing. And he says, I'm just replaying the movie in my head.
Great.
All right, so that's
great.
That's what he's doing.
That's great. The end of the book. Thank you, Julian. The end of the book, I know, is I think his just again. It's an interior monologue. You decided to turn it into the scene between the husband and wife, and end on that wonderful last line. Can you talk about? Did you immediately say, "Oh, this is the way we're going to do it"? Just how are you deciding to leave us as an audience?
Well, no, it was right. It was the end of the book. It's just word for word what Tommy's saying there is the end of the novel. We actually weren't sure when we were shooting the movie, again, exactly what we were going to do there, how we were going to end it, and we had at one point scripted a visual representation of the end of that monologue, so we thought it might start with him in the kitchen with his wife, and then go to that. But when we shot the scene with Tommy, which was, I don't know, midway through the shoot probably, I think we both realized, well, there's no way we're going to cut away from this. So that was that.
The scene right before it, which is, I guess, the last scene time we see Javier, can you just technically say how you broke his arm? What was that? And the decision about how you were going to actually end with him. Just walking away, and I think it's either dissolve or I'm just curious too how, because you're leaving you're finishing this character. What was going on for you guys, and how did you make your decisions?
Ethan, didn't you give him a karate chop?
Yeah, the broken. Just technically, the broken bone, the protruding bone is just, the makeup effects artist is a guy, Christian Tinsley, who did Passion of the Christ. So he had a lot of experience. Again, it's from the book. I can't. There is. It's just a kind of editing thing. There is intervening stuff in the book after that, Javier's character's last scene and the sheriff's ending monologue, but it was just, in the course of adapting this book, as in I imagine any, you just dump 70% of what's in a novel just because, you know, you're making a feature-length movie and there's no way you're going to shoot an entire novel. And I don't know, it just seemed right somehow to have the transition from Javier walking away to wherever the hell he's going to Tommy's reaction to all of the foregoing.
And specifically, when you're actually on the set and the two of you are working, because this is a unique phenomenon, although last year we did have the experience of having the Dayton and Farris, who also work as a team, but they're husband and wife. So brothers' relationships and husbands' wives are different relationships. And I'm curious to see, when you actually are talking to these actors at this moment, for example, Tommy in that last scene, how do you guys actually function? Because this is something we just don't know. Do both of you, are you trading? Are you talking at the same time? What's sort of the process of working with, particularly actors?
Well, it depends whether or not we're working with my wife, in which case Ethan usually talks to her.
Smart.
Yeah, other than that, there's no real pattern. I mean, Tommy, you just don't talk too much because unlike Javier, he's just not that, he might have questions, but, he
Pretty self-sufficient.
He can't be bothered. And he knows what he's doing, so fine. It's between the two of us. It's just very, as everyone here knows, that movie set is a pretty, informal and collegial working environment, so there's just more of us.
Just in the practicality, do either of you, do you leave it to the AD, to your assistant to say, cut in action? Do you both say at the same time? I'm actually really curious. What's the physicality?
That's interesting. She does say cut in action a lot, actually.
No, Joel says action and sometimes forgets to say cut.
Yeah.
And the AD everybody will kind of hold for a take at the end of a take for several seconds when they've run out of dialogue, and the AD will say, "Is that a cut?" Yeah, that's,
One more question in that last thing, which is the accident. Did you storyboard? I'm curious how because I do know or have heard that you guys do actually do sort of storyboards of your pieces. And I'm looking at the very end because you have that accident that happens in the end. And I'm curious how that one evolved because, of course, it's a surprise. No one expects it to happen. And there are not a lot of complicated shots. I think there are like 2 or 3 that actually make the accident.
Yeah, no, it's not. But we do yeah, it's true. We do storyboard everything, and that was storyboarded. That was, a combination of process photography and shots that were done on the location in New Mexico where we shot that scene.
Is the process the shot where he reacts when the car hits or not?
Well, that's one of them, yeah, and everything leading up to that. That's a side angle, sort of medium close-up of Javier in the car is shot on a stage with the background composited in a computer. The actual rig that he was on, he was sitting in a rig that was on basically a big spring that, could pitch the whole thing towards the camera, and it was timed to an air cannon, excuse me, right off camera that then blew the sort of little bits of rubber glass and dust and that at Javier. And we kind of gradually keyed it up as we did successive takes to see, what the threshold was for Javier before he got a whiplash.
Cool, thank you. Julian, the end of your film, also the last, obviously, images of the ice going back up, being reconstructed is an incredibly powerful image. But right before that, you have the whole the scene in the car, and also some complicated shooting. Could you detail those shots, and so that we as directors know how you evolved that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, there were some things that were written. And then as you get to know your actors, like Paul said, what they can do or what they can't do, like the babies, the twin babies. if they're crying or not, or whatever. And then as people get older, they speak, even when they're babies. So there was this kid, and he was very good at crying. But my technique is to live with my actors. We don't rehearse, and I don't make any storyboards. And so I translated the script into French with each one of the actors separately, being that he was never in a room with all those people anyway, so really it was each person's monologue, in a sense. Anyway, Matthew knew me pretty well, and my wife, who plays the woman who sticks her tongue out and shows...
Hey, Lords.
She's the one in the hospital who sticks her tongue out so he will swallow. And he says, come on, this isn't fair. And she is the one who keeps saying we when he says no, and she...
The church scene.
Yeah, in the church scene. Anyway, she enrolled them in a soccer team. Now, they have long hair. They don't have a lot of hair on their bodies. And they didn't want to take a shower with the other guys. And so the soccer coach says, you don't shower, you don't play. And my wife told me this, and I said I'd have a word with the guy. She said, no, please don't you do that. I don't know why she would say that, but I didn't. She didn't do anything about it, and they were thrown off the team. So we go to do the scene the last day, and I see Matthew, and I say to him, just ask this kid if he's got hair on his dick, and then tell him about the football team. So the kid runs out, and this is what a father, particularly a separated father, would ask. I mean, how's the team? Team's fine. What do? We get our gear, we take a shower. Do you have hair on your dick? Oh, no, not yet. Okay, well, I knew a guy, and he wouldn't take his clothes off he showered with his clothes on? And, the dialogue just goes on, and basically that was it, one take. They're having this conversation. And then I knew somebody that had a cerebral hemorrhage, and they stopped taking Tegretol, and what happened was they were speaking, and all of a sudden they get stopped in their speech and just kept saying the same thing over and over again. And I told Matthew about that, and he just did that in the car. And there were no convertibles in the original script, but I wanted to show the landscape, and I like convertibles, so there were always convertibles in the movie. And I spent a lot of time shooting the trees in Paris, and then we were fortunate enough to have the music from Le 400 coups, the 400 blows. And so then he's listening to this other thing, and I just wanted him to veer off the road a little, and obviously we saw this scene with the child running away earlier. I didn't think we needed to see that again. And I wanted it to look like, okay, it's a ride in the country. Usually you think this is a beautiful thing. You're out in the country with your kid, but if there's nobody around and you're having a stroke, it's not such a good thing. And so the camera I wanted it to pan over to the right and to the left. And the cameraman, obviously, where is that camera? Is that God's eye view or whose is it? I mean, I wanted the agitation of him shooting and getting closer to Matthew. And Matthew was stepping on the gas, and that's what made that revving sound that sounded like a tree that was getting cut down. So it was really a guy running alongside the car with the camera and then getting high up on top of him, and it was pretty free form.
When he got high, did the cameraman actually step on something to get high up, or did he literally was holding the camera above? Because you do look down at...
Yeah, he was holding it above. He got on the car. He was like... he was very, very flexible.
Did you do, because a number of takes of that before, because you said the take on at least the story was a one take, but this particular ending was...
I did it twice.
And the ice itself at the end, going backwards, it's an editorial decision?
That was really the key for me to making this movie, those glaciers, and
You mean it?
Dead serious. So I had these two archivists. One's name was Fiona, and the other was Christine in Paris. And I asked them to look at glaciers I asked him to look for bullfighting sequences. I asked him to look for certain things that I needed. And he came up with this stuff, and I was just sitting around listening to Bach for hours, watching it go one way, and then it would stop and start going the other way. And has anybody in this room seen Emil Klomov's Come and See?
Yes, I have.
How many people have seen Come and See in this room?
Probably very
What,
few. This
like
is an
25
amazing, very,
people?
very disturbing Russian
Yeah,
film.
it's a really great film that's worth seeing. Anyway, I thought...
You're
Yeah,
talking about
yeah,
the end
yeah,
of this
yeah,
thing where
yeah.
everything goes
Yeah.
backwards. The entire history of World War II
Yes.
goes backwards. It's amazing.
Once the sound goes out at his accident, and you hear Claude's voice says, I had one last thought, we're going to be late for the theater, then I sank into a coma. You realize that his body of work, his body, was transferred to her, and we get to partake in that. And that's been accomplished. And now there's no fear of death, and he can just
Reconstruct.
go back to and be part of the glaciers again, and everything is sort of back at peace. And so that was, the credits are really the end. That's why when people see my movie and they get up and they thank me before the last frame,
You're mad.
they piss me off.
Yeah, exactly, I can tell. Thank you, Julian. That is an amazing. The Klimov film is amazing. Paul, let's talk about the end of your piece. Actually, I still have to ask. No, I'll yell it. Did the bowling ball actually hit him?
Yeah.
I was really worried about him at that particular moment. You're really into danger here. Talk about that last sequence. I know we saw the beginning of it, but the end of it, which is this violence and this destruction, is pretty amazing. And I'm curious how it evolved, how the three of you worked out, literally just even the blocking of that particular sequence.
Well, it's the bowling alley is in the basement of the Doheny mansion where we shot the movie, and some of the stuff in the film is based on the life of Edward Doheny. And I first knew about the bowling alley because in looking at the research about his life, he got in a ton of trouble, the Teapot Dome scandal, and so he hired a team of lawyers, and there was this great picture of this bowling alley that he had with his desks lined up the length of the bowling alley for his lawyers to help him. And so it became a great place to put this showdown between the two of them. And we refurbished it. It was in disrepair. It used to actually be the home of the AFI, that mansion. And I think that, we went back to Robert Elswit, and he remembered shooting, student films down in this bowling alley. But anyway, we put it back to its, it refurbished it. And I don't remember much about shooting. It was just 2 insane days. I remember really, it was just such a hilarious sight because we would all have little booties on so we wouldn't mark up the floor, or we were in our socks, and it was kind of nice. Just everybody, I don't know, it just seemed like we were operating or something. And
The physicality, though, that goes on there, the pins themselves and the balls, this stuff. Did you do a number of takes? And there's not a lot of space there, so you didn't build a set to put a bunch of cameras. So I suspect that.
No, yeah, we couldn't shoot with 2 cameras. We shot with 1 camera. I mean, we did it piece by piece. We started at the beginning. We more or less knew. Obviously, we knew what the end was going to be, but we didn't do a full blocking rehearsal of it all. We knew we're going to start and you're going to sit over here, and then at a certain point we're going to get up and we're going to start throwing bowling balls. But we tried to not talk too much about it and do each piece as it came to us, do their conversation, and then it was time to throw them. And then as it progressed down the bowling alley, it became something that we had to get more serious about being accurate about, because Daniel was throwing these enormously heavy bowling pins at Paul. So at that point, we kind of had some adult supervision. And
Did you have some lighter pins?
we had some lighter pins too. We had real ones mixed with the fake ones, but you throw a fake one and
It still hurts.
No, you see the...
no, you see the difference. You see the difference. Yeah, and if it hits the wall, it's just gonna
Bounces back.
Yeah, it bounces back, and it doesn't. So
In the very last shot itself, did you know you were going to end long on the back with this last line, or was that also part of the evolution as you were shooting this?
No, quite honestly, it's horrible to shoot in the city of Beverly Hills. You know, they want you taillights by 10 o'clock. And it was about 9:45, you know, and it was the end of the film. And we were, you know, I mean, I knew I had okay, back, this is a good shot, fine, here we go. But they really kicked us out. And the kind of insecurity that you have about, I know that this is the last shot of the film, but you know, it's incredibly hard to commit to, for me at least, just like, do we have this? Is this it? And then we sort of convinced them to allow us to come back the next day with just a few of us and Daniel, and spent about 2 hours doing, really it was just fear, just doing all this close-up on Daniel saying that end, and I just felt like, I was just terrified to shoot the last shot of the film, really is what it was. And we just sort of left and got to the editing room, and it was fine when we were rushing. The one that we did with 5 minutes left, it was just fine how it was.
So all the close-ups that you actually shot the next day,
They're not
unnecessary.
Yeah, they're unnecessary. It's just, you know, just panic. You know,
I thought the end was great.
You know,
He sits there, says, "I'm finished," and it was just perfect.
Yeah.
the music that comes, Brahms suddenly enters. When did Brahms enter your brain?
I'd heard it, you know, before, and when I was writing the film, I kind of put it to the side, and I thought this would be good, and then forgot about it for a while. And you know, when you generally when you get to the end of a film, you know, the editors will put together some kind of reel of all the kind of insane stuff that's gone on. So it was in a music bin in the computer to begin with, because I'd put it there, and the editors put together this thing, you know, just sort of celebrating the end of the film with that piece of music, which reminded me about it again. I said, okay.
You mean a joke reel?
Yeah, kind of a joke reel and insane stuff that had happened. And anyway, and so it reminded me of that song, and I thought, wow, good. And then we put it in the first time. I thought, okay, is this cheating? Are we allowed to do this? And
Meaning what?
I don't know. It just felt so good. It felt so satisfying. You always kind of check yourself if something feels really right or good. You know, you're like, oh no, is that fair? Can we do that?
Let's talk about casting. Obviously, some people say that 90% of your work is done when you've cast. And Paul, I'm curious about casting because children are oftentimes a really challenge, and this young boy has such a significant role. How did you find him? And what's your process? What do you do? How do you go about your interview process?
Smoke cigarettes up here.
You need a cigarette?
I don't think so.
Actually, you could go outside and smoke. I'll ask the question when you come back, but I don't think on the stage.
Really?
I'm serious.
All right.
If Sean was here, he'd be smoking.
I
don't think anybody would say anything about it either.
Maybe that's the reason. Huh?
Just light it up.
How did you cast? And how do you cast?
We found this wonderful 10-year-old boy in Fort Davis, Texas, which is just a town right next to Marfa where we're shooting. To be really blunt with you, we looked at child actors from Los Angeles and New York, and that was not the right thing to do. You know,
How come?
well, they seemed very professional in the wrong way. You know. And, you know, there's the idea that you cast the parent as much as you cast the child, you know, and it can be a tricky situation. So anyway, we found this boy. Casting director went to some schools in the area and more or less said, you know, we're looking for a man in a 10-year-old's body, and just described the character a little bit. You have any boys like that? And they'd say, sure. And one of them really said, I know just who you want to talk to. This is this boy, Dylan Frazier. So she met him and talked with him, and it was just instantly clear that he would be able to do this.
When you say, did he come and read for you? Do you do that?
No,
How do you work?
I just talked with him, just met with him and talked with him and told him about the film and just got to know him as a person. Didn't really read any scenes at all. It didn't feel necessary, honestly. The first time we read the scenes is that we did audition some girls that would play the young girl that he would have scenes with, and he would read it with them, and That's more or less how it went.
In your casting process, do you do readings with them, and do you personally, or do you have an actor? What's the process of, particularly for the smaller roles, because there's some wonderful, wonderful character roles that you put in here, and I'm curious how you find them and what's your process?
I'll read the scene with them.
You personally?
Yeah, my casting director will be there. Sometimes she'll do it, and I'll do it. And mostly I don't know how much that can really tell you. It's a little bit more of getting to know somebody and feeling like they're, it's somebody that you want to be around, more than anything else.
Were there casting challenges for you? Were there a couple roles that were really difficult? I mean, I know there's stories about Paul's role, but I'm curious, I don't know whether you want to talk about that or not, but I'm curious whether there are other roles that became difficult, or that role.
No, finding the boy was going to be the hardest part, going into it. But where we were shooting in Texas, where the brothers shot their film as well, it was, we were there for 3 months, and we came back here for 2 weeks, and we had the most wonderful extras there. I mean, they that we would have, you could give them a line, you could have them do anything. They're so dedicated. They were so into it. We got back to California, and all the extras here are just so jaded. They're so horrible and angry, and really, and they wanted a line. And if they didn't get a line, that they were pissed off that they didn't get a line. But out there were so many wonderful people that you just wanted them to talk. You wanted them to be a part of the scene, and they were an active part of the scene, not of screen time or anything like that.
Where did you find the actor who played Brady?
Bandy.
Bandy.
Sorry. Cassandra found him. I don't know where she found him, honestly.
And did you again meet or read, or how?
Yeah, I met him, and I was so busy. It was the last thing that we had to cast, and I was so busy. And she met him and put him on videotape, and then I saw the videotape and saw all I needed to see, and met him, and that was it.
And the other oil men, out of curiosity, they're smaller roles, but they're all very powerful.
Yeah, there's a terrific actor. It's funny. He steps off the train. He's a competitor of theirs, and he's not an actor. He runs an independent oil refinery down in Long Beach, and we went down there to scout because we were going to shoot down there. And he was just such an amazing character. He's got a claw for a hand. He's got this amazing face, this amazing voice. He's talking. He just could come from a lunch meeting, which was at a strip club nearby, with one of his competitors, another oil refinery across the street, and he was talking about it. And he was just too good to be true. And I asked him if he'd like to be in the film. His name was Dan Swallow. And I asked him if he'd like to be in the film, and he said, well, yeah, I'll consider it, just leave me what it is. And I sort of gave him the scene. I said, will you read it over, and if you want to do it, please come down to Texas and do it. And he said, okay, and he called me, he said, fine, I'll come down and do it. And by the time he'd gotten down to Texas, he'd still had these sides, and he thought that he was playing Daniel, So he had all of Daniel's lines memorized. He thought,
Of course he did.
How did you handle this?
I just said, no, you're not Daniel. That's Daniel. He was very quick he had it all memorized. And what was great was that I showed to people the film, and they see him and they say, it's so great you brought that old actor back. I missed him. He was terrific. He just has that kind of presence about him.
The learning of the sign language, both for the boy and also the companion that becomes the boy. What was the process in that?
Well, we hired an interpreter, someone who's an interpreter for a living, not an actor for a living, rather than have an actor learn sign language or.
So you were using a real person.
Yes, and he taught Dylan, the boy, sign language he came down about 2 weeks early before filming his part down in Texas, and just in off hours would work with him and teach him sign language. And then for the older boy at the end, we cast a deaf actor, a young actor named Russell Harvard.
Nice job. Julian, thank you. In casting, what was the biggest challenge for you in the casting of your picture? Or was there one?
Get the right actors.
And how do you do it? Do you read? Do you talk?
I watched a bunch of French movies.
Mm-hmm.
I'd seen Mathieu Amalric in a movie called La Fin d'Août, Le Début de Septembre, a film by a guy named Olivier Assayas about 10 years ago. I was on a jury in San Sebastian, and his wife, Jean Balibar, won the Best Actress that year. I had seen a remake of Jim Toback's film Fingers called Beat My Heart Skipped, and I saw Niels Arestrup, who played his father. Looks like a cross between Brando and Chris Walken after they've been left in a glacier for about 13 hours. He's got this crazy look in his eyes. Brilliant actor. I saw a film called I'm Not Here to Be Loved with Patrick Chenet and Anne Cossini. Patrick Chenet ended up playing the, when I see these things for ensemble casts, I had an ensemble cast, but nobody knew who they were. They were just an ensemble. Anyway.
Do you end up meeting, now, since you're watching their performance, Julian, and liking these actors, obviously from the movies that you're seeing in them, do you then go about meeting them? Do you actually read any of them, in particular since it's a foreign language film? How did you make your decisions?
I never asked anybody to read anything. I never asked a casting director to do anything. I met every one of the people myself, talked to them directly, met them, shook their hand, said, "You want to do it?" They said yes. That was it. And they're all great. I mean, they're great.
So
every one of them was just, and I couldn't believe they said yes. I mean, because it's like, as a painter, if somebody says, "Yeah, you can paint, but no mineral violet. You can't use mineral violet. And you can't use cadmium yellow either." Okay. All right, well, I better get some orange, but that's not going to exactly be like that. But no matter what happens, no matter how good somebody's going to be, if it's not that thing that you need, it's something else.
How did you cast the children, who play a very big role?
The children?
Yes.
Well, actually, they had 2 children in real life, but I thought they should have 3 in the movie.
Because?
Because 2 children is a little sad.
This is because you have 5.
I do have 5. Can I have a little bit of water? Oh, yeah. That's my secret. Lots of water. Thank you.
So with the number 3...
Okay, I'll tell you why. The one kid's 10. The boy's 10, daughter's 8. Then I met this little girl named Talina Boyacci. She was 6 or something like that, but she was so smart, and she was so funny, and it's like giving the kids a dog or giving the kids a toy. It's much more, I'm serious about this. If you want any directing tips, stick an extra kid in there. Because the daughter gets to pick up the other child so she can speak to her father. That really gives the people something. I don't want people to act when they're in the movie. I don't want anybody acting. So if they just have to get through the day and do whatever somebody asked them to do, that's fine for me. And she was so... But young people and good actors are like sponges, and they see something, they pick it up. And this little kid was invaluable, and they were all good. The little boy was always ready to cry.
And where'd you find it?
Okay, there was a tape. Somebody made a tape of the kids, and so I'd seen them, and like Paul said, many of the actors that were quite good in Paris were too polished already, and they were acting already. And this kid had nice qualities, but he wasn't perfect. So I thought that was good. And in fact, the way I cast them, I acted like I was paralyzed. And I had Matthew tell them that I was their father. So they had to tell me a game and also answer my part of the game. It's amazing what these kids will say, and you could see where they could go. But
and what was the game that you set up? Do you remember?
Hangman was one game.
Which, in fact, you use in the movie, do you know?
Yes, but then, it was very funny because in Ron Harwood's script, it says a day at the beach, but we're supposed to shoot it in 4 days. I said, it doesn't say 4 days at the beach, it says a day at the beach. So the first AD says to me, "How are we going to do that?" I said, we can do it. He says, you want to bet? I said, yeah. And Janu said to him, you shouldn't bet with this guy. But anyway, we did shoot it in one day. I mean, instead of having ice cream, they had sandwiches. It's a lot less messy. And Emmanuelle Senier is somebody who, they're different kind of actresses and actors. Emmanuelle is somebody that you just say something to her and she will do it. The building can fall down. You can have a hurricane. Whatever will go on, she'll do what you ask her to do. Mary Jo, on the other hand, has a bunch more, she's more nervous in some way. So somebody said, well, how did you feel acting directly to the camera? And Mary would just say, oh, it was very complicated. Emmanuelle will say, well, there was nothing to it but to do it. But then you use those things that each of these people have as tics or whatever. So, for example, there was a moment where there was a woman named Sandrine. Now, one thing I want to say is a lot of these women, they really didn't like each other. Sandrine wanted to be the one who could be the one who wrote down the thing from the book. And then later, when he got sick, she wanted to be in the hospital, but the girlfriend didn't want her there. And then the truth of the matter is the girlfriend really did go to the hospital at the end. And, I felt his contribution was much bigger than the jealousy that these women had. And also they had a difficult cloud of his death that was on top of them, but I had to find my own truth for whatever that was. Anyway, what the hell am I talking about?
You know what I'm going to tell you what. Here's one of the things I want to know. Each one of those women actually had to look literally into the lens. Where were you? Where were you?
Yeah, what I wanted to tell you about this one was talking to the lens. Okay, so she did not want to meet Sandrine, and Sandrine was a nightmare. But
Remind us who Sandrine was playing.
Okay, Sandrine is this wonderful lady who taught him the alphabet.
Okay.
But she liked the documentary that Jean-Jacques Bennix made, and I don't know if any of you have seen it. It was made for a very good cause because Jean-Dominique Bauby wanted to prove to everybody that he wrote that book by blinking his eye. And people thought he couldn't do it. So that really served a purpose. But when I showed that film to my wife, she looked at me and said, you are out of your mind. Everybody's thinking, this guy Schnabel is so heavy. Everybody dies. This is the most depressing thing in the world. What are you, nuts? 2 years I got to live with this? And I said, no, it's really funny. This could be really funny, this movie. You don't really see it the way I see it. And
all right, let me bring you back.
okay, so here we are.
Bring you just a little bit back to
Okay, so Henriette, we changed Sandrine's name to Henriette, so she goes into the room and says to him, because he says he wants to die. So she says...
One of the great scenes, by the way.
She says, how dare you say that? I don't even know you, and I care about you. And she goes off and says this. Now, I knew that Sandrine was going to say to her, I would never say that to a patient. So she says that to me, and I said, look, I want you to say this. And by the way, I want you to say a couple more lines. And I give her a couple more lines, and she's got quite a lot of lines. So she's pissed off. And she's saying all of this stuff, and then she walks out. And then I say, and she walks out, the camera's to her, and I said, okay, now go back in and tell him you're sorry, that you went too far, that you didn't want to say that.
And you didn't cut. You kept running.
Yeah, so she comes in, and she gets to say that she's sorry, and everything's all fine, and that's that. But sometimes it's...
Let me answer the question, though. Where are you in terms... No, this is actually fascinating because I realize you made that all happen at the moment, not cutting. She told a truth, and that's what you were after.
Right.
Because this is all done directly into the lens, where are you? Actually, where are you standing? You're not holding the lens itself.
No, I can't, because I'm on the monitor. The room is about as big as the stage, I guess, like half of the stage. Beds in there, whatever. There's a door here. I'm right on the other side of the door.
And it's a real location, right? This is not...
Well, it's in the hospital. I built the room in the hospital. But the wonderful thing is that Jean-Dominique Bauby, or Mathieu Amalric, is in a sound box on the other side of the wall. He can hear everything that they're saying to him, and they can't hear anything that he's saying. So whatever he's saying spontaneously.
And you're recording it.
As we're doing it. Well, we can always go in post-production and do whatever, but I wanted... And really, he is very funny, and he's really bright, and he understood the sardonic sense of humor that Jean Do had. So it was
Thank you very much. Let me ask you, the two of you, for casting challenges that existed for you guys on this particular movie. There are also some wonderful, wonderful performances by the guy, for example, who's just in the I guess the little gas station. I mean, it's a terrific scene. But this is repeatedly through the woman who plays the woman who runs the trailer park. How do you guys go about casting? Do you interview? Do you talk? Do you see people on tape? What's the process?
Well, it's actually kind of the opposite of what these guys were talking about. When we made our first movie, the casting director said to us, "What do you do? How do you cast?" And neither of us had, I think, ever met any actors before. So we just said, "I don't know. We don't know. What do people do?" And he said, "Well, usually what they do is they have people come in and you meet people, and then if you like them, you ask them back, and they read a scene." So we spent like 5 days meeting scores and scores of people, and then he said, "Who do you want to have come back?" And I said, "Everybody." I liked everybody, you know? So we subsequently decided to skip the first part of the process and go straight to the reading. And that's kind of pretty much what we do. The guy in that scene was a great, really fantastic New York actor, born in Louisiana, but New York stage actor named Gene Jones. But I agree with what Paul was saying. Is interesting and really true. There's an amazingly deep talent pool of actors in Texas. I have no idea why. If you go one state over to New Mexico, nothing.
It's all that turquoise jewelry in New Mexico.
Were there some serious challenges for you in terms of any of those roles where you really went through a number of people before you really locked in?
Barry Corbin, the old guy at the end, that Tommy Lee's kin in some unspecified way. That part was, we saw a lot of people. I don't know why that was difficult. Maybe just because of the age. A lot of people, I don't know why, but we saw a lot of people before we met and liked Barry.
And we saw a lot of people for Josh's part, the part that Josh Brolin had.
Got it. And how did you make the decision about Josh, who does an excellent job? Did he read for you?
Well, that was another interest. Josh has told this story, and people may have heard it, but it's true. We also find that we can't tell anything from seeing people on tape. We have to be in the room with them. Mm-hmm. And he had actually was making a movie with Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez. He sent us a tape that Robert directed and Quentin shot. And Ethan looked at it. We both looked at it, and afterwards Ethan said, "Who lit that?" We weren't really interested.
I can't
in
tell.
Josh.
Ethan, did you want to hire that camera person?
Yeah, and also the off-screen woman was very good.
But we saw it. We were just Josh, but he did, and it meant nothing to us. It wasn't until actually we much later we got in a room with him and we did some scenes with him, and then we went, well, then it was just the opposite. It was sort of immediately apparent that this was.
Yeah, that was totally just right, like kind of vibey thing. That was weird because we went into the movie, I mean, on the face of it, it's kind of an everyman part, and I think we went in blithely assuming there were, dozens of people in Hollywood or somewhere that could play that, and were slowly disabused. We met like a lot of people, and it's just, I don't know what it is with Josh.
He's great in it.
Did you get concerned? Did you get concerned that you thought?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, to the point of like, maybe we should rewrite the part or something like that? Did you go that far?
No. Well, a question of rewriting it, but it was definitely a nail biter.
He's got a lot of Nick Nolte in him, doesn't he?
Yeah, in a way, and he has this. Yeah, it's true that we weren't even sure what we were looking for when we first started out. We thought, as Ethan said, that it was a much simpler proposition from a casting point of view, and then we realized there's so much about. He has to be able to sort of believably inhabit the region. He has to do so much of the movie is about sort of physical process and watching him do things.
And also at that
physically.
point, we'd already cast, there are kind of three more or less equal parts, Tommy Lee and Javier, and this open part. And having cast those two guys, Tommy Lee and Javier, we were acutely aware that we didn't want to be cutting between these three separate stories in a way. Tommy Lee is compelling and Javier, we thought would be compelling, and then the dull guy. We'd set the bar kind of high.
Right. And he met it, casting his wife, who's a wonderful, she's a Scottish actress, if I'm correct. How did you make that decision, knowing that you also had obviously an accent issue that you were going to confront?
Well, we didn't want to see her, actually. We had our arm twisted to see her because we both thought, why would we cast a woman from Glasgow with a heavy Glaswegian accent as this woman in a trailer in West Texas? And Kelly was in New York to go to a wedding. And we went, okay, come on in. And she got on the phone with a friend of hers. She just has an amazing facility with accents. I mean, she got on the phone with a friend from Texas for an hour before she came in and did pretty much what you hear in the movie.
Did she come in then with the accent?
Oh, yeah, no,
when you
she
met her,
did.
I mean, did she start with her Scottish accent and then shift, or did she come in and
Well, she said hello in her Scottish accent.
That was it?
It was enough to alarm us.
Because she really is quite wonderful, the piece. I mean, she's very, very special. Very special indeed. Tony, for you, what were the casting challenges for you?
The kid. I mean, the kid.
He's a wonderful kid. And how did you find him? And how do you go about it?
It's the same thing. You start bringing all these kids in, and you just see everybody. They're very, very. You have two things. You have kids that are really, really polished, and then you have kids that are total civilians. And I wasn't rehearsing. I'd never done this before. I was taking a flyer on a huge bunch of other things, and a kid comes in and reads kind of like a machine, and you're going, well, that's acceptable. I'm going to put him in a car with George Clooney. I have 1 day to shoot this and a half a day to shoot this, and I have a bunch of other kids who are sort of spooky, and I finally,
word, isn't it?
and then it's just you're terrified. You don't know what you're just terrified, and I don't think that changes. I'm doing it again right now, and it doesn't change. But that's something you have no control over. And in the rest of the film, you can sort of protect yourself by just hiring brilliant actors that are at least gonna they're gonna be alive. But with the kid, what do you do? And I actually called. I called Steven Soderbergh because I had these two kids, and I had one who was sort of a machine, who was very reliable, who would have been acceptable, and kind of looked like George, and I could triangulate the mother and cast the mother, so it would look all right. And I had Austin, who had no idea what he was doing, but was just so sweet, and eager. And I called Steven and he said, just go for the one that's just pick the one with the most soul, and let the camera do it, and trust that it'll work out. You'd rather have that problem than the other problem. And we did, and I started to work with him. It was the only we didn't rehearse at all for the film. I didn't want to rehearse, but it was the one thing because I was nervous about it. I thought, I'll have him come up and work with him a little bit. And he came up to the house, and I literally got maybe 15 minutes into a conversation with him and sort of easing to because he had to learn all the things. There's a game and a book and a whole sort of life that the kid in the movie has that I really wanted to live off the frame as much as I could. So I started, 10 minutes in, I was like, all I'm doing is making this worse. This kid is gonna, and if I take this apart, I'll never know how to put it back together again. And, but I wanted him. And Ellen Chenoweth, who works with the brothers, she suggested there was a coach, and we sent him outside to a woman who was a coach. And I said, just have him. I sort of wanted to monitor it from afar, but I didn't want to get under the hood so much. And he came back after 1 or 2 sessions, and she had a very light touch. And he came back, and he was comfortable. And again, like having the third child, it didn't take me. Your learning curve goes out of desperation, goes up really quickly. And the first day I realized if he's not doing something in every scene, I'm fucked. So, if you go back and look at the film, he's either eating or I give him his cards. The moment he had something to do, he would lock in. The moment he was thinking about where he was screwed. And George, the other big benefit was George. George had spent all this time on, at one point I said to George, the kid, he goes, did you ever watch the television show I was in? He goes, I was a pediatric. I never saw ER. He goes, I was a pediatrician. Because I've done like 1 million scenes with kids. So they'd be locked in that Mercedes for hours and hours and hours, cranking the radio. He kept Austin loose. So I really, basically, other people did it. It's
interesting because that one scene in the car where he says that's the only scene that the kid has actually nothing to physically do.
No, he has to sit there and listen. Yeah.
But they made a connection.
Well, he's got that face. He's just that. It's the reason that you sort of take the gamble, because he's a really soulful kid, and he didn't know what and he was scared. In a good way. He was scared in the right way.
Were there other parts that were also?
But I think that always actors, grown-up actors, like George was, they can get in the room with the kid and they just start talking to them or whatever and treat them like a person, and then there's no acting anymore.
Yeah.
That really.
You're praying for that.
Were there other roles that you also found challenging for yourself in casting?
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing it again, and I wish I had a system. The brother, again, casting family. I mean, if I find a brother, the brother had to look like he was from the same family, had to have authority. You're looking for somebody fresh. He's playing a cop. It's kind of it's the kind of part that just so easily slips into a cliche. It's right there on the brink. Saw a lot of people, almost settled, and then Sean Coen came in, and we were just like, who is this guy? Never seen him before. He was just fantastic. Sydney's part, Sidney Pollack's part, because Sidney kept dropping out on me, and
because this is the first time for you. I mean,
right.
You're talking about an incredibly experienced and good director on his own, and I'm curious, did he at all turn to you and say, "Why don't you try this?" Or did he really say, "Look, I'm an actor here. That's where I'm going to be. You tell me what you want"?
They were really greedy to be actors. They didn't. I have a lot of directors in the film. There's directors all the way through the film, all kinds of small parts. Doug McGrath and Tom McCarthy and Brian Koppelman and those people all the way through. But George and Sid, they made sure that I had final cut. They made sure that they did everything to protect me all the way down the line. And you'd catch their eye across the room. I mean, the only other person on the set who actually knows what you're going through at 4:30, and when it's about when you're about to pull the plug. I mean, there's the only other person on there. They were immaculate. No one ever said, "Why are we doing this?" No, I never.
This is a question I want to ask that I actually have never asked up here, but I think it's a fascinating question, which has to do with costume and choices that are made, and oftentimes that it's a dialogue that you have with actors. And I'm curious, this is obviously your first time. How did you go about going through the process of choosing
wardrobe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what costume? Yeah.
And I didn't want any. Two things. One, I didn't want any vanity on the movie at all. It was like. I thought that's one thing that I'm really lucky on this picture. I don't care we'll light for the camera, we'll light for the scenes. I don't care how anybody looks. Doesn't matter. I've been on movies where it was really important how people looked. Didn't care about that. Sarah Edwards, who did a great job, she came in and she was eager in the beginning. Here's George Clooney, and you want to dress him. He's going to wear a suit. He hasn't been in a suit in a color film in a while, and big opportunity. And I said, look, he said, this guy he wouldn't buy a suit with a price point over $2,000. So you can't go to Brioni. He's got to be in what he's in. And that immediately, she got it right away. I'll say one thing that I stole from Paul that Paul doesn't. I watched a making of I think it was a Magnolia, because Robert Ellsworth was shooting. I was watching the thing and watched it. And I was shocked at how few people were on set, and there was nothing on set, and it was just Paul and the actors. And I went back to Robert and I said, what is that? And he said, well, Paul doesn't let anybody, there's no final touch-ups, there's none of that. And I said, can we do that? I've been on movie sets can we really do that? He goes, well, you can do whatever you want. So we didn't fully get there. It's a little hard to fully get there with George and, in New York and whatever. But we didn't have any of that. We had no makeup. We had no final touch-ups. We didn't care. It's just, I think, I think it took a week or two for hair and makeup and costume and everybody to realize that what we were doing. But once they got onto the rhythm of it, we just, as long as stuff matched, I didn't give a shit. I mean, it's not the kind of
Tilda
movie.
Swinton's outfits, because in fact you have her dressing, there's an issue here about how she presents herself. Was that something that you were discovering? And
Well, for Tilda's the kind of actor who's very much like, I mean, she's very much about Halloween and getting dressed up and finding the character. And I mean, she'd never been into an office building before, and took her in an office building and had her meet, you know, these women, and she was like, it's like she was on a zoological expedition, you know. This is fascinating. This is unbelievable. So when she had her earrings, the earrings and that uniform and that final outfit, that horrific thing that she wears at the end, and she'd look at herself and, I mean, that's all. So for her, that was just everything. She's an actor who works that way. Nobody else. Everybody else was pretty much, you know.
did she choose it, or did you go through?
We did it together. It was, you know what? That was her. That's the time that she wanted. That was the attention that she wanted. I mean, we weren't, as I said, we weren't rehearsing, and I certainly wasn't. I mean, I wanted to make everything available to every actor as possible and answer every question, but I really didn't feel, and still don't feel, any mastery over getting inside somebody's performance and taking it apart and putting it back together again. It's not something that I really feel comfortable with. So that's what she wanted. That was the energy. She'd want to talk about where she'd come from. She wanted to talk about that. That's what she needed, and that was easy to do.
No. You had a period piece that really isn't well, I mean, it is a period piece, but I'm not saying that it felt like that. I'm curious in terms of choosing wardrobe, although some of your characters are in one for the whole piece. How do you go about making some of the decisions for that?
It's kind of like that. For us, it's in that movie, as in most of ours, it's always not a glamour thing. It is a period thing. Movie, technically, it takes place in 1980, but you know what people are wearing in West Texas 1980 and what they're wearing there now isn't that different. I mean, that was actually a concern, whether people would kind of know that it wasn't a contemporary movie, and we thought, oh, fuck. We put a ring tab on a beer can, we thought, oh, that'll do it. Now it's a period. But we've worked with the same wardrobe designer for many, many movies, Mary Zofries. And again, Mary, you know, like good wardrobe designers, likes character stuff. I mean, she likes thinking about wardrobe as a way of thinking about character, as opposed to, much like Tony was saying, as opposed to thinking about how to make actors look good.
Was it clear that Javier was going to be the way he looked? Were there some choices?
That actually, his wardrobe specifically came, and his haircut as well, came from, wardrobe does do a lot of research, as the art department does generally, just, you know, to kind of see what things really did look like then. And Javier's wardrobe and haircut are largely derived from, they found a picture of a guy in a bar or maybe a whorehouse in Texas in 1979 with that alarming haircut and the kind of tight late 70s wardrobe. And, you know, there you go.
So you guys saw this image? I mean, there was
we saw the photograph, and then we showed it to Javier, and he was on board.
No reservations?
No.
And what was his hair? Speaking of that, is that any of his? Is that all his?
That's all his. Yeah. I mean, that's also, you know, we also have worked for years and years with a guy named Paul LeBlanc, who is just a great. I mean, as Ethan was saying about Mary, he approaches what he does just completely from such an original sort of perspective in terms of getting at the character and finding the sort of haircut for, and it's, you know, and he, it wasn't exactly what the cut that he did for Javier was, you know, sort of modified a little bit from this photograph, but he's so, again, it was sort of that discussion.
Him and Mary talk about now what each other is doing. I mean, there's a woman who's I guess the manager of the trailer park who has a kind of great, hideous print shirt with like Leaning Tower of Pisa, scenes from old Italy on it, and Paul complimented it with this weird beehive hairdo, and
Though this is not wardrobe, the weapon that Javier carries, which is a very big character.
The weapons are meticulously and almost fetishistically described in the book. And in fact, when Cormac did come to the set a couple of times, he likes to see the guns. But it was, and Keith, the prop master, the guy, would look at the description of the gun in the book, and it was described, this is this gun has a Parkerized finish, or it has a certain kind of stock, or it has a silencer sweated to the barrel as big around as a beer can. I mean, those things were all copied from the descriptions in the book.
Did Javier spend some time before he started shooting playing with it?
Yes, he got really into the guns.
He told Javier, who had never touched a gun before, I don't think, before this movie, he told him we were going to get him on the cover of Guns and Ammo magazine. He actually, again, to an alarming degree, liked it and was good at it. Keith took him out target shooting, and he was Javier was pretty good at it.
Then we won't cross him the next time we're working with him. Julian, obviously image is crucial. In choosing wardrobe, I actually keep thinking right this second of when they were at Lourdes and Bobby has that very colorful red and white outfit on that he's walking down the street. What's your process of making these decisions, and how do you work choosing what people are going to be on their bodies?
I pick everything that everybody's going to wear
And how do you,
all the time. From their socks to their tie to the plaid shirt of the doctor dyed all of their doctor's jackets the color of the wall in the hospital because I want the wall and the bodies of them to become like a swimming pool at some time, and do the floor. I built the room, so I put black and green linoleum on the floor and a fluorescent light on the ceiling. And
when you say you pick, do you actually go out shopping? Or do you go with your actor? Do you go with a costume person? Or is this just something that you do totally on your own?
Well, for example, when I came to the set, I noticed that there were no flowers there, and I in John Doe's room, there weren't a lot of flowers, but my friend Fred Hughes, when he was sick, he had lots of flowers. So I basically just stopped on the way and bought all of, they have these zinc kind of things in France, and just bought as many flowers as I could, filled the room up with flowers, and brought what I thought should be on the walls.
I want to keep on order for another beat here. I remember there's a wonderful moment, I think it's Celine, his wife, or not wife, but the mother of his children, out at the beach, and you actually do a closer shot of the legs and the piece of the dress that she's wearing.
Right.
Did you choose that dress? Was it something that she had that you said, you should wear this for this scene? I'm curious how that came.
No, I chose the dress also.
And meaning, do you then literally go shopping?
No, there's the guy, a very good costume designer, went shopping a lot and just showed me basically what I tell him I wanted Chesterfield jackets from London because this guy was a Beau Brummel. He was the editor of French Elle, so I wanted him to have red velvet corduroy pants, and just pick different things, and made the dress, that Emma de Coen is wearing. I'd seen images of 19th century dresses that were there, so I picked the color of cerulean blue and the lace and all of that. And
the Nijinsky outfit came from a...
that's actually Nicolas Laroche, who's the premier ballerina in France, was playing Nijinsky. That's the outfit of the faun. And all the props basically
You choose.
yeah.
I got it. All right. The hat.
Excuse me, the hat. His hat or my hat?
His hat.
Well, I'd like to say something about my hat.
Go right ahead.
That hat, that chapka,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Philip Niarchos gave me that hat years ago, and I thought, we need a hat, you know. And then, so when Isaac DeBankole comes in and he gives him the hat, then he puts the hat on top of this guy, so all of a sudden
You have
the
the lens.
frame has this furry corner, and it was one way of this thing transmitting love or something like that, or when he was, his friend could read to him, if he's wearing the hat, he's in the...
So wonderful.
I actually physically sewed all the costumes
I
on
know.
my film.
But, and on mine. He actually, I didn't say that. He actually sewed that dress on mine.
I have a question about the lip. When we see the lip, is the lip a prosthetic? Is it something that he did himself? Because it's really quite.
We had a great makeup people. It would have taken too long to. It never looks right when you have a prosthetic thing just stuck on the face. So what we did is we had a patch over one eye. Contact lens that was bloodshot on his other eye, a piece of plastic stuck in his nose, a bite plate on his bottom lip, and we glued his lip to his face. And then his hands were on pieces of foam. And it was really, you could take that off quite easily, but most of the time, just so the rest of the actors would never have the feeling like he was a normal guy. I mean, this guy stayed like that all of the time.
So the contact lens in the eye, because I know there's very, very bloodshot, and that was because of the lens that you were able to put in the eye, or
I put the bloodshot lens in the eye because when you get sick, your eyes get screwed up. But basically, if you see all of that, or you're trying to look through it, what I'm saying is it's very hard to see anybody or anything. And the one thing that Matthew said to me is, he said, you know, when you don't move, people think you're not there. And you're not. And you're invisible. And so that whole idea of being invisible was, and after a while, I mean, I think he said it informed his humor, and that's why Jean Doe didn't have any self-pity, and he was able to. But also, if you close your eye when that is, then all of a sudden the landscape gets much bigger, and you can have these crazy conversations with yourself that everybody's locked out of. But it was just a physically
you were very specific.
generating kind of.
When you sew up the eye,
Yes.
What was the effect that you were able to accomplish?
I took a piece of latex and I put it over the lens, and the prop man had worked in a hospital before, and he sewed the eye up.
And was there a light that also shone on it? Because it has before it closes, you feel that red.
Yeah, well, when you take a light, I mean, and you get it closer, there you see the red that's on the inside of your.
So you were
tissues.
able to put some light on this latex.
Well, right in front of it.
In front of it. Got it.
Certainly wasn't in his.
Yeah, not yet.
Yeah, wasn't in the camera. Wasn't.
Now I realize you did sew everything. Thank you, Julian. And I think you really did a great job. How was wardrobe chosen, particularly for Daniel? And I'm looking at the hat and the outfits. How did you do this together? What's the process for you?
Yeah, well, I've worked with a terrific costume designer for 14 years, Mark Bridges, who, it's nice on a film like the one that we were making, was so many photographs and research material to work from. So, and very, very, very traditional. Nothing. Just a costume meeting, you know, to get together with Daniel and Mark and myself, and it can be a long thing. So I don't, you know, be there a little bit and look at things, but we did it over a couple days, really, you know, because you get kind of burned out looking at too many hats, you know. You just sort of narrow it down and do it like that.
Is Daniel very specific as an actor about this for himself? Because some actors are very, very concerned, just as you were saying about Tilda. I mean, it can help define character for some. And
yeah, for sure, definitely. I mean, he had a lot of different things to wear, but we never really had a situation where it wasn't like on some films you kind of you have to pick one or two main things to wear. We had so much for him to wear that we just sort of tried to pick a good bunch of stuff and bring it out to Texas with us. And we're kind of free to make it up a little bit as we went along.
So you had a kind of wardrobe that he could choose from.
Yeah, more or less, probably the same size wardrobe as Plainview would have. Just think of it from that point of view. He wasn't bringing stuff out there that they wouldn't really bring out there.
In Paul Dano's case, you've got. I'm curious about that cross at the end, and whether you chose. I wanted something big, wanted something small, because it's there. You're noticing it, and I'm curious.
Yeah, that was just an idea that Mark Bridges had, as these things go, maybe you talk about certain things beforehand, but more or less, but by the time we shot that scene at the end. They just came down into the bowling alley and said, "Here's two options. What do you?" We just picked one all together. That sort of thing.
In challenging scenes, because there's some amazing scenes in all of your movies, and I'm curious about some of them, just to how you actually were able to pull them off. For example, in your scene when the explosion happens, the large one, and then the boy is thrown off the roof, and Daniel and others go to save him. Talk about how you staged that. What was the technical stuff of getting that thing to the roaring up, and how you got the oil to be within the many shots that are part of that sequence, plus that wonderful, I assume, Steadicam shot where he runs with the boy. Talk about that and how many days that was.
Yeah, just briefly. Well, we had a derrick out there, and we needed to light it on fire. There's a terrific special effects coordinator, Steve Cremens, that was responsible for it. I remember actually we were testing stuff, and we were really screwing the brothers up because we were testing our explosions.
Yeah. Shooting Josh.
They were shooting.
We were shooting Josh Brolin walking across this landscape in the most remote place in the United States, in West Texas, near Big Bend. You couldn't get further from human beings. And over the next rise, Josh was this big in frame, and over the rise behind him, there was smoke from Paul testing his oil product.
So we just had a lot of diesel fuel and very, very dry wood, to be really simple about it.
So the stuff that's actually coming out actually is a diesel fuel. It's not something.
You can get away with a lot in Texas.
It's not colored water.
No, that's not colored water. To shoot that in California would have been impossible. You can't even shoot a campfire scene in California without a fire marshal shutting you down. But in West Texas, there really is no adult supervision at all. Right. It really is. I mean, you could.
So, but for closer stuff,
Continue.
for closer material, where they are running and getting soaked, were you?
Oh, there's Methicil, which it sounds good, but I don't even know what it is. And there's the chocolate stuff that they put in milkshakes at McDonald's. These are all the kind of things special effects guys love this sort of stuff. And to make oil, and then we would pour some alcohol in there, to get it to kind of rainbow, that sort of thing.
And the pushback of the boy, where the actual roof sort of.
Just Steve Cremens, terrific. We'd actually tried to do that once. I guess the traditional way is to do it with a small person. But it looks like a really big, small person, man-child being thrown through the air. It just looks like it's just.
Did you try shooting that first?
Yeah, for like 3 days, and it was really embarrassing. 3 days throwing this poor man around, and it never really. And we said to Dillis, I said to Steve, this looks really fake again, So we just building a harness and a device that you can pull the boy through the air, that kind of thing. He's a real tough kid, but he was terrified to do it. And then the special effects guy, his little 10-year-old daughter, she did it to show him. Once he saw that, he said, all right, I can do it. Great.
The shot where Daniel picks him up and runs.
Yeah.
And you've got, it's an amazing sort of shot, and I'm curious, was
it's
this...
a Steadicam on a golf cart. So the Steadicam sitting on the golf cart, and there, Jeff Kunkel, Dolly Grip, is driving the golf cart, and Colin Anderson was filming.
Was this also in that sequence, do you storyboard? Was this one, or this evolve as you're on location? Yeah, obviously.
It evolved as we were on location. We kept talking about how we might do it. Once the derrick was built, we just sort of, either in off hours or as official meetings about effects and that kind of stuff, do it. But those the official meetings with everybody just are paralyzing because there's not, you have to kind of know what's going on and then they happen. And generally it's the side meetings that always splinter off where all the work kind of seems to get done and then you come back for another official meeting so you can then describe what we need to do. But more or less it's everybody just sort of talking and talking and talking because we're so terrified of this thing that we ultimately have to do, which is burn this thing to the ground, and once it's gone, that was it. So once we did it, Steve Kremens is the special effects coordinator. His obligation was to say, I can light this thing on fire, but there's a chance I might not be able to put it out, and I just sort of assumed he has to say that, he has to say that. Of course we can put this out, He just wants to cover himself. But we had about 5 or 6 cameras and the whole thing planned out. And the second it went up, I thought, we're in the middle of West Texas. I mean, this is the driest place on earth. And there's 50,000 gallons of diesel fuel. There's no way we're going to turn this thing off, And it lit up like a Christmas tree. So we had to shoot the whole thing in 45 minutes. We turned the nozzle off, tried to pour some water on it, reset a few cameras, and just said, let's keep shooting until it gets dark. So we did it all in 45 minutes, which was great, because we'd probably still be there planning it right now.
in the
Best way for things to happen.
In the running shot, did you do that a number of times? I'm curious.
No, just twice.
Just twice. Yeah. And with Daniel's work and Paul's work, I mean, they're incredibly well matched. I mean, there's some wonderful work with both of them, as we saw in this last scene. Any of them one need more attention, more takes than the other? This is actually just a practical thing of,
No, very, very balanced. No, very, very balanced. And I think it was great. Most of the shots that we would do where it was just the two of them, we would only do that and just sort of work at that. And Paul had the benefit of working with Daniel before on The Ballad of Jack and Rose, so he kind of knew what he was in for. And Paul's no slouch, very serious young actor. I don't mean humorless, but just very committed.
There's a shot where he gives his first sermon, which is, I think it starts on Daniel and then brings us to, and then it stays as a single for a fairly long time. And I'm curious, again, was this something that evolved as you were shooting, or did you preconceive it?
I didn't really preconceive it. I mean, it's always ideal to have something in one shot because it's hard enough to get it once, let alone get it again another direction, But something like that, in particular, where someone's going to have to kind of, rise to the occasion and really do a lot of physical work, rather than chop it up. And ideally, if it can work and it makes sense, it's not, for a nonsense reason, it can be like that.
And did you rehearse a number of times, for example, that scene before?
No, not really. The night before, Paul had been spending some time in the church and trying things on for size, and I came in after we finished shooting the day, and I looked at what he had planned out, and it looked really good, and said a few things, and then, which was really nice because I saw how he had plotted it out, and I said, what's really nice is that I can shoot it and could shoot it in one take, so you don't have to. It's nice because then you're after that one thing that you're after, as opposed to piecemeals.
Now, did you spend any rehearsal time at all before, particularly with Daniel?
No, not really. No.
Got it. So, in preparation for his character, even the physical character, the limp and the rest, was this stuff that you talked about, or did you do any work beforehand?
Yeah, no, we talked about the film for a few years. We tried to get it off the ground and didn't for a number of reasons, and it just kind of gave us the benefit of talking over the telephone for about a year, just bullshitting, really, not talking that much about the movie, but just getting used to each other, I suppose.
Well, you've gotten used to each other really well. Julian, I know this is a minor one, but I'm actually curious technically how you did it. The Fly. The Fly did a very good job on 2 shots. How did you actually pull this off?
Froze him.
Is that true? I've heard this story that you catch a fly, you freeze it?
Freeze the fly.
Thank you. Shall I push some more about it? Let me ask you another question. All the stuff in the diving bell, and how did you shoot it? Where did you shoot it? And I assume that he was in some of them because it looks like in the closer shots, I think I see his
He's
face.
in it, yeah.
Where did you do it?
We went to the coast near
Lyon, somewhere around there.
Right.
Can't remember. I mean, we had more than one fly, I must say.
I'm not going to push it.
There were just a few. There was a bunch of flies. They were all frozen. And then the fly wrangler, the same guy who sewed up the eye, took the fly, stuck it on his nose, and as he got unfrozen, he moved around more. Matthew got inside of this diving bell. It's a real medieval device. I mean, they bolt this thing onto your torso, and you have weights on your feet. And I definitely wouldn't get in there. I mean, it's brutal. And also, the radio was broken. I could hear him through the air hose. So if he had a problem, he had to just say my name. I was in the water with him in most. And the one moment when I wasn't, all of a sudden the cameraman, not the normal cameraman, this underwater cameraman, grabbed him and started to pull him out of the water. And if you get water in that, you go on an angle, you get pulled off, the water can go inside his helmet and he could drown. Got him up on this thing, and I've never seen Matthew angry ever. Took this thing, he says, "What are you doing? I'm acting." The guy just didn't know the finger signs. Everybody else did, and that was, but then we went back under the water and did that, and then there was, you know why Jean-Dominique Bauby picked that metaphor. I mean, it is brutal. And for somebody that has claustrophobia like me, that was one of the things that really drew me to this. Because I always thought if I had locked-in syndrome, that would be the worst thing that ever happened to me. But the thing I found out in doing the movie was that he actually felt selected, told his friend Bernard Chapuis, "I am not the same guy. I've been reborn as someone else." And I think he really felt like this was a good thing.
Yeah. Well, that obviously is
and that
for us.
really changed my
That's why the film gets made.
my process.
The scene in the two other scenes. The scene in the airplane, which is this empty cartridge.
Yes.
Talk about how you chose to do that. I see there's at least a smile behind it.
Well, it's interesting to get in such a big plane when it's empty, and then I thought it was very funny that the guy would say, "I need your seat," and he said, "Of course you can have my seat." The whole airplane is empty, and the doors open, and the engines are going. I mean, you hear this thing, and so obviously.
Were you on a real plane at that time, or were you on one of the models?
It took longer to get into the plane through all of the security than it did to shoot the scene.
Right. And did you do that? That was shot in France.
In France.
Yeah.
And
the scenes in Lourdes. That's why the girl who sticks her tongue out. I was curious whether that was just happened or you had directed it and cast it.
No. My wife has a great mouth, and I mean, she's got a great mouth. And no, that was something that I thought, she's got to do that. That was definitely scripted.
Mm-hmm. And the other,
I wasn't making the movie if she didn't do that.
And the other characters that are on the streets, or
but in Lord, I mean, the first shot in the movie is Marina Hand's hair flying around like that. So basically, I put her on the back of a pickup truck, and then the hairdresser and the other prop man, they had fans, and I mean, because people's hair doesn't go like that, even if you're driving in a very fast car. But I had driven up from Cannes to Nîmes years ago to meet my wife before we were married, and I was listening to Baby Light My Way on the CD player, driving at about 150 miles an hour, and I had that in my head. So that was the first shot of the movie. That wouldn't be a bad poster. It's a little late.
Well, you may be opening in another place, so don't. It may not be too late.
But I thought, they've been inside the whole time. Now he's going to get out. I think that's a good thing to see.
It's a great image. It is a great image. The operation in the self-operation, Javier's actually doing all of that in the bathtub and all the rest. How did that evolve? How did you? And again, was this storyboarded? And it's pretty hard to watch. And I'm curious how you shot it.
It was, what did we do? We met with a trauma surgeon before we started shooting, and we said, if you got this kind of wound and you had to treat yourself, what would you do, basically? So, and we said, there was the scene, we knew there was going to be the scene where he goes into the pharmacy and he sort of, gets what he needs. But, I think that was basically it, right? We asked this doctor, who was great. He just kind of said, well, I think there was some description in the book of him picking the fibers out of the wound. That I think was in the book.
So you had that one close-up of the tweezer of that
Right.
piece, but all the action itself. I mean, what was this? Was this a fake leg? What were you doing to actually just literally do it?
That's Christian again.
Again, Christian Tinsley. Yeah, it was a latex thing, appliance over Javier's leg. Just the flesh blended. It's just Christian's really good at what he does.
And Javi was doing it?
And Javier was doing it. Yeah, none of it was double.
Except for the injection, the last injection.
That's the prop guy's
which
leg.
Javier was going. Keith said, if you don't want to do this, I'll do it. And Javier said, great. Yeah, it's like just a little, you're seeing about this much of his thigh.
But like a lot of the movie, right, it's just a process stuff, people doing physical things, so we, kind of figure out what the individual bits of action would be, storyboarded it, and then...
The scene that we saw, which has the dog chasing, there are a number of shots that I think are in the water itself as well as outside, and this was, I assume, storyboarded. Working with animals is often a challenge. Was this dog just a nice go-get-'em, or...?
No, that was not a movie dog. That was a mean dog. He was a...
It was a dog, what do you call it, gun?
The dog was...
It was a sleeping,
You mean when he leaps and fires at him and falls? Yeah. Well, the dog was all the same dog up until...
you shot him.
one shot where he falls on the ground with the dog next to him, which was a
different dog,
latex dog.
Right. So how did you get the shots with this non-trained, aggressive, mean-spirited dog? And was it just one, or did you have a double?
Just one.
Just one who was really agitated by the trainer had taught the dog, if he saw a particular toy, actually. Right. The dog was trained as like an attack dog, as a dog to a guard dog. It was trained, to go after people.
It was trained well.
And how did you find him? How did you find him?
Well, we had pictures of other dogs that were like movie dogs. This dog swims really well, but they all didn't look.
Didn't your parents raise that
enough.
dog? I'm sorry.
It was all very low tech. I mean, there was no effects or anything. It was just Josh and the dog in the water. Josh would take this agitating toy, show it to the dog so the dog knew Josh had it. Josh would then stuff it into his pants, jump into the water and start swimming like hell, and they let the dog go.
Was there any fear on your part that the dog was going to catch up?
I have to say, in addition to that, he was doing this, Josh was, with a broken collarbone, because he broke his collarbone about a week before we started shooting. So he could only, when he was swimming in that water, he could only really use one arm. And he admitted he didn't sort of realize how fast that dog could swim. He was pretty scared.
What happened? What was the action that happened when the dog jumps up towards him? What happened there?
The dog was on a leash.
Right.
And the leash, it was a jerk lead, basically. Right. The dog was essentially in a harness on a leash. The leash was painted out.
Right.
When the gun, and that was composited with the hand firing the gun, which was shot against a blue screen.
Knowing that you just said there was composited, was that also in terms of as you were designing this sequence, and just like the car sequence that you just talked about, you also had a process shot. As you in pre-production were talking, was this, how are we going to get this shot, and this is the way to do it? I'm curious. Was that its evolution?
Yeah, I think.
Right, just breaking down the pieces. That was the only process thing. That was the only blue screen. shot. The rest of it, as I say, was pretty much just what you see in camera. The thing that was a pain in the ass about the scene was that we decided part of the drama of the scene is going to be day arriving, breaking day. So that meant shooting each of these. This was like exhaustively storyboarded, and we had to shoot pieces at dusk and dawn, you know, within 20-minute windows over the course of many non-consecutive days. Mostly us, but maybe a third of it, second unit, went up there.
We're working with animals issues, the scenes with the horses, Tony. They're very, very powerful emotionally, and in terms of, I think, of just the thematic moment. What was the process of getting them to sort of be there? I mean, was it easy or a challenge, and particularly running away? How did that stuff get staged?
Yeah, well, to piggyback on this, I mean, I will never again write Just Before Dawn, because we had the same situation. I mean, it's just, you get 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes at night. Literally, that's all you get. So it was a very, very mapped out military operation to get all that covered. We went up there, I don't know, I think we went up there 5-6 times. We ended up videotaping all the pieces. We had a cardboard horse that we put up on the hill, and you know, there's a very comical video that's been edited together of, you know, assistant director playing George, and we did it over time. We winnowed down the coverage to the absolute minimum. We knew exactly what pieces we needed to get every day. And we had 5 days, 5 mornings and 5 afternoons to get everything, that whole sequence.
When you were doing this, whittling down, is this pre-production time?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so you went up there. Okay, fine.
Oh, many times. Yeah. So we had a. By the time we started, we knew exactly what we were going for, and then we had some extra credit pieces that if we got lucky, we'll try to get this, and we'll try to get this, and we got a couple of those. But you know, we would have been saved if we'd ever gotten one day that had been overcast for the whole thing. We would have, but we never got that break. But we also didn't get skunked because we were in the middle of the winter, and the whole thing would have fallen apart if it snowed. Would have snowed. The horses, I mean, it's like Paul said, I mean, you end up with all these, you have the big panic meeting, and then you have, you know, the horse team goes out, and then the car guy, and this and that, and the crane. We had someone who was in production who was a really great horsewoman, and so she just, you know, she absorbed that project, and she started going up, and she found the horses, she found the horse people, and then it turned out that the trick was to have the horses live there on that hill for that week, to like be there on the other side of the hill. They build a corral and they lived there and they got comfortable. What?
Freeze them.
Exactly. They were, boy. It was, and then there's some very comical, you know, gag reel footage of a, you know, guy lying on the ground shaking a rattle as George is standing there emoting in front of the horse. You know, I mean, it's very. It's like all the rest of this. You talk it to death and you pray to God that it's going to work. And
when they ran, was there something fired or something going off when the horses run?
Yeah, it's not hard. Yeah, but the thing about that is that they come and tell you. Then they come and say, "Well, look." They tell you, you know, the day before. They go, "You know, it turns out that the more times you scare them and run, the first one's only going to be the one that looks right." Oh, great. So we don't have any other horses, and we're locked in here. And so now we have not only one shot to blow up the Mercedes, and one shot to do this, and one shot to do something else. We got basically one shot to scare these horses. Man, you just throw all the prep you can throw at it. You just try to take every kind of. We just scared the shit out of the horses, and they ran, and we had 2 or 3 cameras, and you know. Just this brilliant camera team. And
let me talk about using your cameras. You do this twice where you're telling sort of 3 or 4 stories at the exact same time. There's a 360-degree shot in Times Square, and we see the U North, which in fact I'd like to know how you accomplish that, the U North advertisement, and I assume it's Times Square. Yeah. But you're cutting back to Michael, I guess, on the phone, and also the apartment, and where you're hearing that same conversation, and these guys that are, breaking into the apartment. Right. I assume this is all written, but I'm curious to the sort of your directorial choices of shots to pull this all together.
I mean, it was all scripted. I mean, I knew what I was going for. I mean, the U North commercial is maybe like sort of, you know, geeky, interesting. I didn't want to have that. We wanted to have a commercial. We wanted to really create this corporation and really have an identity. And one of the things that I learned from making movies with Taylor Hackford, one of the things that Taylor was really good at was if there was something that was not supposed to be part of the movie, he'd really push it off to the side and have it exist on its own. We sort of took that to an extreme here. I wanted to have a corporate identity. I wanted the corporation to have a history. And I also wanted to have a 30-second spot that we could use as an artifact however we wanted to use it. So not that we would, you had the movie thing. Well, I wanted to have a real plastic thing that however we wanted it to be, we could do. So we took it away from the movie, and long before the movie started, we started conversations with a commercial production house in New York called Fluid, and we looked at all those spots that they run on Sunday mornings, and we said, this is what we want, and it took a long time to clear things, obviously. We finally made... the only thing that we shot for that commercial is we shot the sort of beatific shots of the children, with my daughter's the girl with the seeds going through her hand, and the little black boy putting this. We shot 3 of those. We gave it to them, and they did a jingle, and they came back with a real 30-second spot that we can you could run it on Meet the Press, and everyone would be. So we had that. So now we could use it however we wanted to. We weren't locked in, and it didn't smell like the movie at all. And
how'd you get it in Times Square, or did you?
We went to Times Square in pre-production. We looked at all the billboards. We began negotiations with several of the different places. We found the one that we liked the most was the Reuters sign, but it has, I think it's 13 panels. It's very dramatic. It was in the best camera position, and we went to them, and you buy it. And you go to them and you take your commercial to them, and they have a designer there who panels it all out. So all of a sudden you have now all these other choices, and it costs, I can't remember, it's very expensive. But
was it difficult to shoot the 360 in Times Square? I mean, how did you arrange that?
We went out in camera tests. Actually, in pre-production, in the camera tests, we went out on a bitter cold night one night, and where there was really very few people down there, and I stood in for Tom, and we worked out the moves for the whole thing. We worked it out, and I was never an actor before. I'd never been on camera before. I never had anything, and just standing there that night for an hour and a half, working out these camera moves with this camera running around me, gave me more insight into what it was so valuable just to stand there and sort of pretend to pretend, So we got to work out the move, but there's something really fundamental that I got out of the vulnerability of being an actor and standing there, something really I hadn't really sort of stepped into before. It was all mapped out, all our complicated, the murder, the Tom Wilkinson's murder, again, all really.
You did that almost as a one, or if I.
That's a single take, yeah.
And was that, did you, as you were writing or thinking about it?
It's written on the page that way. It's written in a really sort of hypey, this has to take place in 90 seconds. It sort of runs down, and that's the only thing that we rehearsed. I can't remember Jerry's last name. What's Jerry's last name? The stunt. Yeah, Jerry Hewitt.
One of the nice things that all of you have done, and it, I think makes all these pictures sort of fascinating, is time and the ability to not feel forced. I mean, lots of times we feel we have to rush things because of obviously the experience of the multimedia experiences that we all have. And in each one of your films, you actually take time for certain performances, for certain moments to actually exist, like that one. And that's why I'm asking about,
It's called Final Cut.
Well, I'm talking, even in staging, you waited. You have them wait till he dies.
Oh, that was, yeah. I mean, that's about my favorite thing in the whole movie. I mean, seriously, that moment of them. I cast. I knew what I wanted to do. That I wanted to do it all in one. I made sure that when people came in on audition for that part, I was casting people who were handy. One guy came in, Terry Serpico, had a lot of stunt stuff on his resume. The other actor, Robert Prescott, who came in, and this has happened to me several times, was someone I knew as a friend, and I happened to play golf with him. He's one of the best golfers I've ever played with in my life. He's an extraordinary athlete. So he came in and he was great, and I thought, well, God, he's a great athlete. And Terry, and I put them with Jerry Hewitt for about a month beforehand. And first they had a stunt man who was Tom Wilkinson's size, and then finally Tom came in at the end, and we would go back and visit them every week and say, you got 90 seconds from the time he comes in the door till the time he's dead. This is all the stuff you have to do. And and they got really, at the end of it, they got really good at it. And but the moment of waiting, you couldn't really. I was really dependent on them to. It's hard to say to somebody, wait, really wait, but don't wait too. What do you say? I thought that I wanted a moment of, as professional and clinical and awful as they were, I wanted some like smell of shame in the room, if that was possible to have them. So, and they said, well, what do you, I said, well, imagine like you're taking a shit in the same room with somebody. They don't want to, there's a moment where they don't want to look at each other when they know what they're doing. But I was really dependent on Terry Serpico to call it. I didn't want to be off camera going, now's the time. And Terry, he's a dancer and just his timing, and you're standing there waiting, and you're sort of watching the monitor, and everything else is good. And I think we did, and you're just, this one's so great, is he going to pull up? And it's just, oh God, he's waited too long. No, he hasn't. And it's just, he called it, and it's just...
Two more sets of questions for all of you, although I wouldn't mind spending the day with all of you because you have so much for us to learn from. But tell us, what was the most challenging scene for you as you think about it right now? And answer that question, Tony. What's the most challenging scene? It may be an acting scene, it may be a production scene, but as you look at it, this was the biggest challenge.
Oh, man. I was going to live or die on what happened in that scene that we showed up here, the confrontation between Tom and Tilda. I mean, I sort of squander a lot of traditional storytelling along the way, and it's kind of a wandering kind of thriller, and I knew I was living or dying on that scene. And so, if you know that, and it's sort of, all the logistical stuff of the field, and it makes you nervous, but you kind of figure, well, if I fuck it up, they're going to have to let me come back and get some version of it, because otherwise we don't have a movie. But I can't come back and make that last scene come alive, if it doesn't work. I think that was the real nail biter. We set up an environment where it was all pre-lit, so we didn't have to relight or do anything. It was just an environment the actors could work in. And we had a couple days. It was the one place we had a couple days to do something.
Did you do multiple cameras for it or not?
I'm trying to think. Maybe no, not really. No.
And the one shot, which is the sort of the killer shot where he's walking.
The walk away.
And a lot of stuff is happening behind.
Yeah, we worked. I mean, it was designed, for Tilda to go and to make sure George cleared. And look, I mean, it's just it's Robert, it's Scott Sakamoto, the operator, it's Baz, it's this, it's a Ferrari camera team. Just really tuned up, and everybody really pulling, and everybody at that point really in shape. That's not a scene you'd want to tackle early on. Everybody's in shape.
And you didn't rehearse it?
Oh, physically? You mean
no,
before?
Not physically. No, actually rehearsed this scene
beforehand in pre-production.
Yeah.
No, we didn't. No, there wasn't one acting rehearsal for this film.
And did they rehearse it though before you start the day of shooting or the days of shooting? Did you do a sort of rehearsals?
Not a temperature. No.
But something at least to get started, right?
The block, yeah. But I don't really want to see it all out when they're blocking.
Got it. Cool. Thank you. How about for you guys? What if we can think of one of the more challenging scenes, or either whether a production or with your actors? What sort of comes to mind at this moment?
Well, definitely, the chase scene we were talking about, the dawn chase scene with the dog and water and everything, and the pressure of, dawn and dusk. I mean, that was the one that, in pre-production of the movie, it was the one that we thought, all right, this is going to be hard. It's definitely that scene.
Were there any acting scenes, just performance scenes that you also were either concerned with, or were challenges, or they maybe ended up on the editing floor because they didn't work?
You didn't really lose anything.
I don't think there was anything that we didn't, whole scenes that we shot that we didn't include in the movie. I don't believe. Scenes were shortened, certain scenes were shortened considerably just because that seemed to
Which
make
one?
them play better.
Give me an example of something that did actually end up being shortened.
Many, I'm talking, you're excising lines here, or, so many in a way that probably I can't even, where we shortened at least, partially a scene that we shot may have been a little bit fuller in terms of dialogue or the length of the scene or even the amount of action. But that's a hard question to answer because it's so common.
Got it.
But no, I mean, each scene, that's an easier question to answer, to be honest with you, I think from my point of view. Just talking about the challenges inherent in any particular scene, it's hard to me sort of quantify this being more challenging than the next. The challenges are all so different. Often when I hear that, I just migrate in my mind to sort of technical and logistical challenges. I don't know why I do. I mean, I just,
Well, right. I think we don't worry about them. I mean, we felt confident. We felt good about the cast, and there was nothing. All the kind of anxieties which you have, and you have millions of them. They weren't about that. I mean, they were about logistical things. I mean, they were about.
The scene where Javier strangles the deputy was actually a very difficult technical challenge from the point of view of anchoring the two bodies together, protecting the two actors physically. It looks quite simple, but you can't actually put handcuffs on someone and have them exert any pressure without completely tearing up their wrists. And the weight of one person on another, when you're heaving someone around, there's quite a lot of infrastructure in that scene you don't see under the actors' costumes. That took a lot of experimentation and work to work out. But that's one of those things that goes by fairly fast, and you go, oh, well, they're tossing each other around on the floor. And in fact, there's quite a lot that happened in there just from
How much time did you spend actually shooting that sequence?
Well, we didn't spend that much time shooting it, but we spent a lot of time with Christian and the makeup people and the special effects people actually figuring out how do you have one guy fall on top of another and heave him around with a pair of handcuffs on where you're not injuring Javier. And even so, Javier got very, very beat up doing that.
Good. Thank you, guys. Julian, for you, was there a challenging scene, or either in terms of relationships or just the physical challenge that comes to mind for you?
I guess I needed to figure out how to shoot the movie. And shoot a movie where they're talking to the camera, and the camera is the guy. And so when you read the script, it says something, but it doesn't really mean what you have to do. So you sort of have to physically break down the text in order to understand really what you're going to tell somebody to do. Mm-hmm. And so, if Matthew would have had the camera, if he sat near the bed, the eye line of the girls would have been screwed up. If I did it, it was, we just had to figure out a way really to tell the story according to Jean-Dominique Bauby. And I think what was really great working with Janusz, also this crank camera was a wonderful thing, because when my father died, I went up into the room a few moments after, and bile was coming out of his mouth, and his eyes were flickering in his head. And I thought maybe he had a little bit of air still in his brain. I could say, "Dad," and he could maybe see me. But I didn't want to shoot what I saw. I wanted to shoot what my father saw. And so that's one shot that we're doing, where we just shoot at different speeds all these people that are talking to him. And the beginning and the end were one shot. There was very little done in post-production. Editor was great. Juliet Welfling did a really amazing job. I'm glad she got nominated, because I don't know if anybody ever heard of her in the United States, but she edited all the Jacques Audiac films. He's a pretty talented guy. So that was that, I guess. It was just, for me, it's really about freedom. And when the cameraman says to me, mounts a camera on the side of the car, and I said, well, why is the camera mounted there? And he said, well, there are 4 ways to shoot a car scene. I said, if there are 4 ways to shoot a car scene, we can all go home right now. So I said, well, what do you want me to do? I said, I want you to take the camera off the car, and I want you to lie on the front seat of the car with your head where your feet would be. Start shooting from there. He says, are you kidding? I said, no. It's in the movie. But, you know, to get people to unlearn what they've learned. And just to keep it fresh.
I got it. And you did. For you, Paul, one of the challenging scenes, either acting or production, that comes to mind?
I've been sitting here trying to rack my brain.
You had all this time.
At all this time. And I always feel like, I look back, I'm such a Pollyanna, you know, through the experience. I thought, wasn't that fantastic? It was kind of easy, wasn't it? And everyone was like, no, that was a fucking nightmare, you know? But I think I go to the practical things as well that stand in your way, or just the one thing I did think of was that, you know, we made most of the film was outside, and by the time we got to the end, we had 2 very long scenes that were inside, and there's not a lot of joy in either one of the scenes, and so I can remember feeling depressed that we weren't outside, you know, and feeling just kind of.
The second scene you're talking about is the scene between the older age.
That's right. In the mansion, Daniel says a lot of nasty things to his son. So it's nasty to begin with, but on top of that, we'd spent 3 months outside in West Texas, and here we were in this mansion. It was horrible, just unpleasant. But other than that, it's so hard to pick it apart that way, be objective about it. It's all great.
Well, let me ask you a last question, which I always ask up here, and I'd like to sort of, what's the worst and best part of your experience as being a director? What's the worst and best for you? This is your first time out, you're about to do it again, Tony. What's the worst and best?
The worst part is the finality of walking away from everything, sort of saying, that's the last time I'm going to do this. It's that clutch of like, do I really have it? I'm never coming back here again. This is the last moment I get to get this shot. It's that sort of stunning reality every day, about 6 times a day, that you kind of. I kind of knew it a little bit as a writer. I had the JV version of it, which is the night before a scene is shot. You know, you sort of the script you've been working on for years, and all of a sudden you realize it's going to go the next day. But it's. You know, when you're turning around for good. And that's really, you have to get really brave after a while to do that.
And the best?
The best part was to be, well, I was going to say the best part's to be in charge, but it's not really. The best part was sort of this tribal journey through all these different communities that I had sort of witnessed from the outside. You know, I was this whole sort of, I mean, it really is. You go from this early pre-production community to this pre-production community, and then you leave the office, you go here, and then you shoot, and you think, well, shooting is the movie, and then you go editing, you think, well, this is then, and then, you know, and then you're mixing, and then it's the world of color, and it's just all these communities that you go through, and if you're having a good time and you like the process and you want to be around people who really know what they're doing, and I don't know, that was an unanticipated pleasure.
Thank you, Tony. For the two of you, what would you say is the best or worst?
Well, it's interesting.
What he said.
I
would relate to both of those, man. I mean, like driving home at the end of the day, you go, fuck, I'm so stupid. Why didn't we do this or that? And it's just, oh, man. It's, the 17 times a day where you got to admit that you're unbelievably stupid to yourself. And again, the positive thing is actually, the process keeps changing. It's really stimulating that it's all these different things. And I kind of feel fortunate that we're involved in all those things and not just in production or just in post-production. Or, you know, they're all, the fact that it's doing it is so many different things is just stimulating.
And the other part of what Tony was saying, I think, is, you know, the social aspect of making a movie, which is, I mean, you're migrating through these different communities, but the communities are all, they're all these interesting collaborations. You're not sitting, it's very different from sort of sitting in a room and writing or doing a solitary activity. I mean, just that aspect of it is a part of, such a fundamental part of making movies that it seems that if that isn't where you derive a good part of the enjoyment, you're not gonna. It's just you're in the wrong job. It's not for you. But I think Tony, that I agree. Also, that was
Community.
Yeah, that sort of resonated.
Got it. Julian, for you, the worst and the best of being a director?
I think the prize is doing the work. And I think it's all good.
No negative?
Somebody could always fuck your movie up later, no matter how good it is. That's a drag. But the part I did, I must say I'm guilty for all of my sins, and I'm very happy with all of it. I love working with the actors. I'm extremely honored to be here with these guys, because every one of these people that I'm up here with, I have a lot of respect for. I don't have respect for everybody.
Bernd Eichinger.
Pardon?
Bernd Eichinger.
I love him. And so, I think the world is in a really messed up place. And it seems to me that every one of the films that these people have made address something that is, I once talked to this friend of mine as things were getting more difficult, and he said, things aren't getting better, people just get tougher. And, it would seem to me that we could, if we can't fix the writer's strike thing, how are we going to fix the Mideast? I mean, so I don't know anything about the writer's strike. Tony does, but he's not going to talk about it today. But I think that there's a lot of love that all of these people put into this work. And that is visible in the work. The humanism is visible in the work, and that I admire. And I really do admire these people. I admire Sean a lot. And so just the fact that there's a group of you out here and we're even talking about this means there's some smidgen of freedom in this country still.
Well spoken. Well spoken.
Okay. Thank you. I thought it was a privilege to make a movie.
Right, and it is. Paul, for you, the worst part of it and the best part of it?
No, I don't have anything better to say than... It's great to do it. It's sad when you're not doing it. But I look forward to being able to do it again.
Well, simply put, the five of you have done something really noble for all of us. Your skills, your craft, your artistry, your intelligence, and your insight has made a special experience for all of us as viewers. And we thank you and hope you will continue to make wonderful films. Thank you for participating with us.
Thank you.